What's going on, everybody? I don't know. Dave's been messing with this thing again. I had the wrong scene on here. I can't even get it back to malicious scene, so we'll just have it black. Maybe we can figure it out some other time. So we'll just have to go without the militia logo. That ain't cool, but I've been sitting here trying to figure out how to add it, and it's not telling me. Not very user friendly. I went to the militia page and copied it, but it's not allowing me to paste. So anyway, I'm not fooled with this much. So we'll worry about that some other time. Hope everybody's having a good weekend. Dame, if your ears are burning for good reason, if you can come in and figure it out, I'd appreciate it. If not, life goes on. I like having that backdrop, though. It's pretty cool. Anywho, maybe it might make it easier to see the chat and comments. So guess I'll have to start sharing those. What's going on, Curtis? What's up, brother? So we'll just not have the militia backdrop, I guess, because it wasn't an option up there. What's going on, brother? What's up, Carter? What's going on, Frank? Yeah, man, I'm back every Wednesday and Saturday. I'll be here unless I'm sick or out of town. In which case, if I am, I will have Curtis here to pick up. I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself? We're going to do a beginning to end today, so that's always fun. We'll give beginners time to kind of trickle in here, and then we'll get started. We're going to, kind of just start with basics, and it's going to be, kind of beginners to intermediate. But I know a lot of people, there's been some confusion. I get a lot of questions, and based on some of the questions I get, people are, putting the horse before the cart a little, or cart before the horse a little bit before they, you know, Shawshank Redemptions. Man, I can't watch that now. All right, let me share this link. And I'll be right back. I don't know where Curtis is. I called him earlier, or Clint. I called him earlier and he didn't answer. So he's probably busy right now. I don't know what he's up to. Let me get these links shared. I wish I could figure out how to put the militia backdrop in there. I did a little screenshot of it. We'll do it again here. No, it's way oversized for it, but that's going to add it right in there. All right, anyway. Let me open up these groups and start sharing the link. We'll worry about that later. No biggie. So I hope everybody's having a good weekend. I spent a lot of time in the yard today, cutting down a few trees that need to be cut back and some shrubs, and got some stuff hauled off, and got all my tomato vines and everything pulled, my tomato cages pulled up, and cleaned up some stuff. That was always fun. All right, let's see. 12. That's about what they let me usually share, is about 12. So we'll see how it goes. go from there. Okay, let's do this again. All right, let's try this. So I'm sharing these. I guess I can talk. We're gonna. What was it taking so long? Plus a minute. It took a long time. We're gonna talk about first equipment and stuff. So that's the first thing. When you're deciding to get in the hobby, your first choice should be, what do I want to make? You're gonna make brandies, whiskeys, rums, tequilas, vodkas. Whatever distillate you like best may depend on what equipment you buy for your hobby. So if you're a vodka person and you like neutral spirits, and you like mixing it with stuff later on, post flavoring, you know maybe you're going to think about columns and go on the column route. Um, Thinking more in line of brandies and whiskeys, and you're going to have to think about a pot still with a whiskey head or a horse head on it, which is more conducive for making whiskeys and brandies with a lot of flavors. So, or you can get something modular like a lot of people do these days, and be able to interchange and kind of do both. So you can take off with the tri clamps and ferrules. That allows us to take off and add in um, columns, horse heads, straight pipe into a thumper or an infusion. So there's lots of different options that need to be considered before you just jump in there. That being said, like the Bever footballs, we talk about those a lot. Keg steels, we talk about those a lot because those are pretty, easily convertible, converted to whatever you want to use them for. And, 10, 13, 15 gallon, 18 and a half gallon, definitely a hobby, good hobby sized without getting too big, and they're very versatile, because they have the tri clamp and ferrule set up. So that makes it a lot easier to let's see, makes it a lot easier to interchange and adapt your system based on what you want. So if you're wanting something like that, I think a keg steel or a bever football is definitely the way to go. I used a keg steel forever, and they work perfectly well. My biggest issue with the keg steels, of course, was cleaning them out. It was difficult to clean, and I didn't have a pressure washer. I didn't have much money, back then, and so I didn't have a pressure washer or anything like that. So I'd have to take it to the car wash, and clean it out. That was a pain in the ass. But it did a decent job, and I got it sprayed out. I didn't use the soap or nothing. I just used the rinse cycle and sprayed it out real good, and that worked real well. It got it cleaned out, and I probably would have cleaned it more often if I'd have had better tools and a pressure washer back then. They've got the little roto heads you can put on there that you can just basically just stick it down into the keg, and it blows out the sides, right? And it cleans all the sidewalls. And that's basically, where you get a little bit of accumulation. A lot of people say, oh, I never get anything, mine. And that's wonderful. That's great if you don't. But Mine right on the sides where it foams up, and they do foam up inside there. If you ever get a glass, you can look at it, watch it. It'll foam up inside there, and as that foam hits that, it'll dry up on there and it cakes up, and you get a little residue build up. And, if you don't keep it kind of clean, it can kind of, I don't know, if you got some fruit or something on there, it's going to start getting a little bacteria on there, in between runs. So, um, it's good to keep it clean. And, with that small ferrule on there, you can't exactly get your arm in there and scrub around. So I recommend either you get the little pressure head, the rotor head that blows out the sides to kind of clean it out that way. I've heard people filling them halfway with water and putting some pebbles in there and then rolling it down the hill and let the pebbles kind of scrub it. That's ingenious. That works. And some people just weld a 4 or 6 inch ferrule on top. They take that 2 inch off there and they put a bigger one on there, and that way they can get in there and scrub it down and clean it up real good. And just go with an adapter. They go with an adapter from 4 to 2 or 6 to 2 or whatever size you're using. Don't want to get too big, on a cake still. It's just 15 gallons and of ever. I think the largest one they've got now is about 18 and a half gallon. And so you don't really want to go beyond 4 inches as far as plumbing wise. I think 2 is perfect, but I think if you want to put those columns on there, I think the 4 inch columns do really, really well, because they've got more scrubbers and bubblers, bubble plates in there, and they're larger, and you've got more bubblers and downcomers, and you're going to get a little bit better um, action off one of those than if you just had like a two. The two I think has one little bubbler in there, and I think the three might have a few, but the four, it's got like five in there, plus the downcomer. So it's markedly better, and I think anything less than a four is going to be okay, but just not quite, up to snuff. Now, a 4 inch, you know, for a 15 to 18 would be okay. If you've got a 5 or a 10, you don't want to use a 4, of course. One of the 2s or 3s is going to be fine. And, but that 4, that should do pretty well on up to maybe around a 50, or so. And then if you get a little bit bigger than that, of course, you may want to go with a 6 inch or something like that. But or stack another 4 on top of it, and get a higher column and get more bubbling that way. Probably be cheaper that way for sure, and more cost effective. But yeah, I think a 4 inch, is probably would be about the minimum I would go. Sorry, I just got all those links shared. Now I'm not able to see my questions and comments. So what temp do I like to keep my mash at? Well, it depends on what I've got. Carpenter, I'll start with you. And I'll highlight that, and let me turn that on, and let's go to wide and big, big and tall. That's what. Ooh, okay, that works. Um, Maybe medium and big. I thought big and tall worked better, but yeah, let's see. I don't know. What y'all think? Wide or big, tall? I don't know. I think your thoughts in yeah, I think wide maybe. I think now that we got this black background, it's a little easier to read too. But what temp do I like to keep my mash at? It depends on the mash and the yeast. Different yeasts and different mash or musts or washes are all going to have different temperatures that are best, and that's going to be mostly based on your yeast. So, like tequila mashes and yeast like warmth. They like it warm. So, 85, is probably going to be a good, 85 to 90 even, for a good temp for a tequila and in a good blue tequila yeast. A regular grain, 80. 80 to 85 range is fine for grains. It's fine for bread, bread yeast or, dairy yeast. They work pretty well at that temperature. So, that's going to be a pretty good, and it works off pretty quickly. Same thing for a wash, a rum wash or something like that, 80 to 85 range is going to be good. But if you've got wine and you're thinking about, brandies and wines, then you're talking about 70s, in the mid 70s, so 75, is going to be a better and a longer term, it's going to be a slower process. And that's what you want. You don't want necessarily fast and furious when it comes to wine and brandies. You want a good slow ferment and a good slow steady ferment, which is best for wine. So it really depends on what you're, going to be making, to what temperature, and the yeast to what temperature that you're going to want to use it at. Good question. What's going on, Henry? Yeah, we were talking about this last week. I've heard of, the pine tea, but I've not heard of them, doing the fermentation and, carbonation of it, or using the fermentation and carbonation process. But you know, eh, I don't think there's going to be much starches or sugars in pine. So is it really a pine shine, or is it just a pine flavored sugar wash, right? Because you're going to add something in there for the yeast to eat, and there's just not enough anything, in a pine needle. There's not enough starch and there's not enough sugars in there for it to eat. Um, so we got to have something in there for it to eat, And I think, they were talking about the making like a kombucha, which is basically a fermented tea, and you're going to use some kind of sugar in there, right? So I would say some kind of sweetener that doesn't add a lot of bite. I like dextrose. It's a little bit more expensive, but there are places that you can save a lot of money getting it a little bit cheaper. Um, or corn syrup, but that's going to give you a little bit of corn flavor that you might not like with that. But I think for the most part, if I were to try to come up with something pine flavored, I would probably make a neutral spirit, and then maybe just, steep some pine needles in that to get that pine to come through, and do it that way. Now, and that would be kind of like making a tincture, right? So I think that would probably be the best way if you really want to get that pine flavor. But um, if you don't, you're going to end up with something that's going to be pretty hot, because it's just going to be pure sugar, unless you make a vodka with, a grain or something like that, and distill it to a neutral flavor where you can't even really tell what its base was. They do a lot of that with corn or wheat or potatoes, whatever you want to use, and just distill a good neutral, and then maybe make a tincture with your pine needles. I think that'd probably be your best route. What's going on, Scott? No time, long time no see, man. I know it's been a whole 3 days, man. I missed you, bro. Also, how much do you guys in America pay for propane? I think the last I saw was like 25 bucks or so for the little 20 pound, and that's just like at a gas station. Let me see what the old Walmart price is. Let's see if I got Walmart on speed dial here. Uh, and that's if you just, exchange um, your tank. Well, that's crazy. That's no way. Um, about 25 bucks for a 20 pound, tank, and that's exchange. If you have to, if you don't have the tank, it's going to cost you a little bit more. That's why sometimes it's better to use electric, and to go the electric route, because of the long run. It's definitely a lot cheaper, and a lot of people love it. And I'm already getting a little bit behind, so I'm going to have to. Yeah, and that's a good point. I'm glad you made that point. Not all pine trees are safe, and I was looking at something the other day. They were talking about cedar trees and the berries, and some of the berries, the juniper berries. You really have to identify the juniper tree that berry is coming from, because not all juniper berries are good. So I'm not an arborist. I'm not going to profess to be, but I did do some research on it, and there's some out there that are quite bad for you. So you really need to. I think there was a red American or something like that was pretty common and good, but there are some out there that aren't good. So you really need to be careful when it comes to trees and barks and using woods for flavoring and for steeping and for aging, like red oak. There's a reason that they don't have red oak barrels, and that's because a lot of people like me um, have reactions to it, just from then the red maple the same. So there's a reason they use, pretty much a white oak or a chestnut, and they pretty much limit their barrels to a few. I've heard them using cherry, but you really have to be careful, with certain leaves of trees that you think are safe and common, but some leaves are toxic, and they do that because they don't want animals eating them, right? A lot of deer and giraffes come along, they eat the leaves off the trees, it can kill them. So over the millions of years, these trees have adapted to make their leaves toxic to keep the damn giraffes and the deer from eating them. And so you got to be real careful when you deal with a lot of leaves and things like that. You really need to know what you're doing. And with the juniper berries, I've heard. So yeah, just don't go out and start grabbing stuff up. And that's why I keep talking about getting this book with identifiers that can help you identify the plants and everything because there's so many plants that look just like a plant that's edible that's toxic, right? So you really need to know or have some method of identification, um, so you will know. Right, yeah. So I think it'd be better for steeping, but again, with the maple, it's certain maples are better, but the sap's different than the actual wood itself. So that's good, and you can use walnut tree sap. I don't know, they make syrups out of quite a few different trees, and all those are fine. So be careful, but read up on these things, and don't just use Reddit. Get it from a really reliable source. Your life could depend on it, right? So use some good sources of information. Don't just take some fool's word for it on Reddit or Wikipedia even, because a lot of that shit's opinionated. So it's go to an arborist site or something that's renowned, or National Institute of Health or something like that. That's really going to give you some facts instead of some dude that thinks something. Yeah, I think Alan Bishop does tap some maple trees. Got quite a few members in the militia and stuff. I've seen tapping maple trees and stuff, and walnut trees and other trees. So yeah, it's great. Um, and it's very watery. There's not a lot of sugars in it, so you kind of have to reduce it down. And I was thinking about doing a watermelon that way. If I ever do another watermelon again, it's definitely gonna, I'm gonna get just the syrups out of it, just the juice out of it, no pulp, and I'm gonna, kind of condense it down by reducing it and getting a lot of that water off, because I think that's probably going to be really the best way to get that flavor to carry forward. I didn't have time to do it that way this year, but I think that's going to be the best way to do it if I ever do watermelon again, which may not. Yeah, I've got some maple liquor. In fact, it is good. Acerem, yeah. Is that the red juniper berry, the red American or something? I'll look that up real quickly for y'all. Uh, okay. Eastern red cedar. That's what it is. The Eastern red cedar, Juniperus virg. Yeah, yeah. Some juniper berries are not edible and can be toxic. So you really need to be able to identify your junipers and I will paste this for your viewing pleasure. I know it's going to go out to every site, but that's fine. But it gives y'all something to read there. But here it is. Yeah, the Eastern Red Cedar, Juniperus virginiana, is a red juniper tree with edible berries. Right, yeah, and it's better, like it says, it's spiced, not a food store. So this isn't something you're going to forage and fill up on because it's going to make you sick, whether it's toxic or not, because they're quite acidic and probably going to not be too well on your stomach. Um, but great for meat, stews, marinades. Yeah, it's great for flavoring, spicing, and gin. So they do mention that. But yeah, so don't just go out there and start picking juniper berries because it's a juniper berry because some of them not so good. So it's really good to know what you're picking. That's awesome. What's the best way to infuse flavor? A thumper box or infusion jars people are using? Um, I think if you have like a 2 or 3 infusion jar rig, that's probably going to be the best damn thing. I've tasted liquor just coming out of a thumper, and it's great, but herein lies the problem. Most thumpers are fairly large, and they fill up with water pretty quickly because it's that's how the proof gets increased. It's removing water from your distillate, right? So that's how your proof gets taken up. So you're getting constant condensation. Now, I will say, and I need to say this every time because people say I'm not answering questions. I'm behind. I always get behind. I will get to your questions. Be patient, and I will get there, as fast as I can. So just bear with me. Don't think I'm overlooking you. I'm just going to go straight down the list here, and as questions are asked, I'm going to try to answer them. And I'll try to do it as quickly as possible because we're going to do a beginning to end today. But I do want to answer everybody's questions first because that's primarily what we do here is just questions and answers and try to give people answers to their questions, right? So anyway, back to the thumper. Usually thumpers are fairly large. And to infuse the flavor, it takes quite a bit to put in there to begin with, just to fill up the bottom to where to where it'll bubble through what you got. To whereas if you have something tall and narrow, it bubbles up through more of it, right? So if you had a real tall, narrow thumper that it bubbled through a lot of this infusion stuff, that would probably be more conducive. But most thumpers are like short and squat, right? And so it takes a lot to fill them up. And it take infusion, flavors and fruits and stuff that you're infusing with isn't cheap. Like a lot of people like to use, you know, like a Daly's strawberry mix or something like that if they want to bake strawberry, or blueberry syrup if they want to do blueberries, or they'll muddle up their own fruit, mix it with some sugar and sweeten it up a little bit and make a nice syrup out of it, and they'll dump that in there. But that gets expensive because it gets watered down pretty quickly. So you constantly have to dump and drain and add new juice as you progress through the distillation process. For each quart, basically, you're going to want to dump some and add some. So the jar rigs, they're smaller, so it doesn't take quite as much of your infusion juices to get it bubbling through. They're generally jars that are narrow, right, tall. So I think the taller and more narrow you can get it helps up to a point where I think my inline infuser is a little too narrow. So I did inline and made it bubble up through it, but I think it's just a little too narrow and it doesn't hold enough of the flavor. So something in between that and a thumper would probably work best. But a multiple jar rig makes it pass through this multiple times and flavors, and I think that generally gives more flavor than anything else I've tried. Okay, what chart, brother? What chart are we talking about? Oh, chat on screen. Okay. Can you not see that? Can you Are you able to see the comments there? Yeah, I just on the oyster shells, just get them out and boil them up, and that way, if any bacteria or anything's on there, kill them off, and then rinse them with cold water, let them dry out, and just throw them in a cheesecloth and pitch them in same time you do the yeast, and as the acid builds up, the organic acids that are created during the fermentation process start building up, especially in your washes or anything that's got a lot of sugar. They tend to really go fast and build up. Not as necessary probably in a grain that takes 4 days and it really doesn't build. I've never had a pH crash on a grain, but I've had plenty of pH crashes on sugar shines and on rums and things of that nature, and on tequilas, anything that has a lot of syrups and sweets. Yeah, it can crash pretty quickly. So in those, just throw in you can put them in a little brew bag. If you got a brew bag, that's fine. But boil them up, clean them up, and that way you're gonna kill off any bacteria that's in it. They say they're already purified and clean, but I yeah, I want to make sure there's no you know uh, little sea critters still alive in there, or dead carcasses of the inside of some of the, I guess, what do they call it, what is it that gets on your boat and stuff? You have barnacles, the barnacleization, little animals inside there. So yeah. Okay. Could you weld an opening that gets held with clasps onto a keg, and do people usually weld a drain on them? Yeah, you can. Most people on the kegs, they'll weld a 2-inch ferrule or two for heating elements. A lot of people put a drain on there just as well. I've seen people flip them upside down and use the 2-inch ferrule as a drain and use them as a fermenter, and they just kind of get that the flocculants that settle to the bottom off there by opening up that valve and dumping it real quick, and then they'll put a 4-inch ferrule on the top, to make it a little easier to clean out and stuff. So I've seen a lot of you can do a lot of things. They're pretty flexible. But yeah, with the thumpers, I think if you either use a half gallon, I think is pretty one of the most popular jars. It's pretty good size, half gallon. So you get a couple of few of those in line, and it's decent. You can put my bypass on there when it's time to change them out. You don't have to wear your grill gloves, and that's one thing I don't like about the jar rigs is you have to keep your infusion juices hot. You can't just dump cold infusion juices in that hot jar, it's going to crack, right? So I think, if you could make something similar to a half gallon, 3/4 of a gallon, tall, narrow copper with a little sight glass in there, so when it's getting close to the middle and it's time to dump and add more infusion. I think that with a drain on the bottom and infusion port and top, of course, in and out on the top as well. I think that's going to be probably your best bet. I'm pretty sure Fieldbilly can build those. Most of your steel builders can throw those together pretty quickly. It's just a small, round infusion port in and out. With you can put 3 2-inch ferrules on the top of it, so it's going to have to be at least that big around. So you can put 1 2 3 ferrules, fit 3 on there, and be able to get to your valve and your spools to clamp on there, and your downcomer inside there, of course, on the input side, coming down. Maybe a little sight glass. You can just basically weld a 2-inch or a 3-inch ferrule on the side, and they make little sight glasses that you can try clamp in there, and and do something like that, and just put a drain in the bottom. I think that would probably be the best route, and it's a mini thumper. You can use it. You don't have to use it for infusion. You can use this little mini thumper and use it just to increase proof. So it'd be pretty, and you can put them in line. You can put several in line, and again, if you wanted to put a bypass on there, you could, but probably a little less critical since you're not handling it. That you could open up the infusion port and dump, but make sure you're not exhausting pressure, keep the pressure moving through there. So it's not blowing everything back out on you, because that shit gets hot. 200 degrees, man. It's pretty warm. Got an 8-inch stainless steel and use a 3-inch. Are you talking about a column? That's perfect for an 8. Yeah, perfect. What's going on, cowboy? I appreciate it, brother. I certainly do. Your first yeast wash. Awesome. You gonna do some sour mashing? Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you know you can, if you know somebody that's got a welder, I know that a lot of people don't have a welder, on hand. So you have to find somebody who's got it. Somebody with a TIG works real well, but getting them welded onto a keg shouldn't be too much. If you know them well enough, you give them a jar of liquor, and they'd probably be happy to do that. About 20 minutes behind, so I gotta get caught up. Cool, cool. Yeah, I think the worms were definitely the way to go for sure. I mean, it's nice to have that shotgun condenser. It's all compact and easy, and you can force water in it and out. You don't have to really worry about the drain and getting overfilled and overflowing like you do a flake. But some worms, the flake is enclosed, so that's nice too. You know, so you can force water in there and regulate the temperature. If it's not getting cold enough, you can force it in there. But if you have just like a drain in the side and it's open on top, you can only put water in as quickly as it can drain it, right? So sometimes it can get away from you, and it's not you'll have to cool the water going into it to a point where it'll regulate properly to get you that 60 to 75 degree Cinderella zone that you want to kind of be in. Again, it's not the end of the world if it gets a little hot or a little cold, as long as you don't have vapors coming out that are explosive. That's the main thing. But if you can regulate it to the point where you can get it to 60 to 75 and maintain that temperature throughout, it's probably going to be optimal for you. Doing pretty good, brother. How's it going? I'm feeling a little better than I thought I would, man. I did a lot of yard work today, cut a couple of trees down and hauled a lot of brush. Me and Ann both hauled a lot of brush and pulled up all my tomato cages. Did a lot of work out in the yard, and I figured I'd be sore and my knee's a little bit sore, but other than that, I feel pretty good. So maybe I need to do that more often. I think columns and thumpers do different things. I think thumpers generally don't take as much flavor out as they proof up a little bit. I think a properly run column will strip more flavors and definitely boost the proof more than just a thumper. They call them doublers, but a thumper is really not a doubler. Doesn't double the proof. You go in at 120, you're probably going to come out at 140, 50, right? You do the same on a column, you're coming out 160, 180. If you run the D flag, you can pump that up to 190 and make a traditional official vodka, right? Because to make vodka, it has to get to at least 190 proof, I think. And it's thumpers are great though for maintaining flavor, and you can infuse with them. So, and it's kind of difficult to infuse in a column. You don't want this nasty clean up a column with all that. What's going on, brother? Good to see you here, my man. Get a 100-pound tank for 50, 65. That's a good deal. Let's do the math. That's five into that. So you probably get what, $15 for every 20 pounds. 15 times 5, 30, 60. So that's be 75. So it's a little cheaper than that. You're getting about 12 maybe. So that's a good deal. Yeah, definitely the way to go. And yeah, the larger the tank, the cheaper it's going to be. And And I mean, if you got one of them big, if you got like a heating system in your home that requires propane, you got one of them big 100, 500, or 1,000 gallon tank next to your home. You know, you can get those filled really cheaply, and you can shine for days on that. But I think electric, you know, really when you just break down the cost, unless you're really in a real high electric zone, I think electricity is probably going to be the cheapest method. But you know, it's kind of hard to do electric outside, right? Without a generator or a big long cord or cable or something, you know, where you can plug in next to the house or in, you know, so it's a little bit different, you know. So it really depends on where you are. But everybody that's gone to electric that's used, you know, fire or gas swears they'll never go back. So there has to be something behind that. I've not done the electric yet. I've done it on stove, I've done it on fire, and I've done it on propane, but I've not used the elements yet. But that is coming soon. I'm going to build me a little SCR and probably get at least a 3,500 to 4,500 element for my keg and try running it that way. No, arbutus. I don't know if we have those here, brother. And I'm googling because I don't know what the fucking arbutus tree is. Okay, uh, this is where Santa gets to learn some ARBUTI. Isn't it? Called madrones. A plant, and it has like a fruit. Yeah, this is a British Columbia Pacific. Some people call them strawberry trees. So, interesting. 12 accepted species, flowering. Some produce fruits. Interesting. Mediterranean, Western Europe. Arbutus. Arbutus. I don't know. Arbutus. That's the way it was pronounced to me by this. Okay, arbutus. Yeah, I think they might have those in the Pacific Northwest and not where I live, and in Europe and British Columbia, Mediterranean, Western Europe. Yeah, they don't have those in Eastern U.S. But sounds interesting. Okay, out of 25 liters, let's see. 25 liters is how many gallons? That's 6.6 gallons. So you're going to have about 330 milliliters of fours and heads to remove, and then after that, you know, start tasting. And that's not, you know, it varies. It's, you know, 50 milliliters, they say, per gallon. So you know, that's going to be around 360 50 milliliters per gallon. So 50 times 6.6 is 330 milliliters per gallon. So, um, but in certain brandies, it's going to tend to be a little bit more. And in like a sugar wash or a tequila or something like that, you're gonna have less, right? And grains are going to kind of fall right into the middle there. So learning to do your cuts helps, but just using that as a guide to beginning and knowing when to really start focusing on smelling and tasting, it can help. You know, but it's not set in stone. Yeah, yeah. Columns are great for cleaning stuff up, and you know, if you've got some bad flavored stuff, you can run it through the column and it'll clean it up real well. And it's great for stripping flavor. You know, and sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes sometimes some of the stuff that comes off, like my watermelon, is not going to be that damn good. It's hitting a column. You can bet your ass my watermelon will be on a column here before too long, because it was horrible. Right. And and neutral flavor, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's one thing though. I see a lot of people making the mistake, and it's not necessarily a mistake. I wouldn't do it, but of making like a brandy and then putting it on a column, and it's like, do you really want to go to the trouble of building flavors in a brandy and then strip them off? And I think, maybe a brandy coming straight off the tap would probably be one of the best ways to do it. Maybe a double run, um, and do it like a cognac, put it back in the back set like we talk about, instead of just, running it all out and mixing it, proofing it down with water and then running it again, because you're kind of diluting your flavors when you do that. So I'm real big, and a lot of people have done that in the past, but I'm real big on dumping it back into the back set. Now I will take some back set out, so I don't just totally dilute it all and have to run everything again. So, but it. I think adding it to that back set, that retains a lot of flavor as opposed to proofing it down with water. But yeah, your columns do great for um, neutral spirits, but not so good for your whiskeys and bourbons, right? Okay. Yeah. So unless you're wanting to do neutral, you don't need a column really. I mean, that's what columns do best is the neutral. And if you want to just up your proof without getting a column, just put a deflagmator on there and just get your reflux that way. And you won't lose as much flavor, but you'll get a little higher proof. But or use a thumper. But putting the bubble plates in there and the scrubbers definitely going to take out some flavor. And you want to use a deflagmator on top of your column, right, to regulate and adjust your column. To adjust the flow rate and to adjust the load in your column. You want to kind of keep it in the middle and not too high or too low. So you can use your deflagmator to adjust that. That's going to be a little bit more advanced, but it's going great, Mike. How you doing, brother? Yeah, I'm giving up some secrets. Sure am, man. Yeah, or jar instead of jars though. Try to try to make yourself a little copper. Use some copper. Just put 3 ferrules up there, 3 2-inch ferrules, and have a down comber go into the bottom of it, and just a little sight glass in it. I mean, it's going to cost a lot ferrule wise, but copper wise, it's not going to be that expensive if you can solder them. Probably be the best way to go. But jar rigs work great. Put a triple jar rig with a bypass on it, man. It's awesome. And they can pull some really good flavors. They really do. I was kind of skeptical at first, but after looking at the principles of it and seeing the difference between just running it, trying to infuse with a keg and wasting so much of that infusion flavor, trying to fill that big ass keg, thumper up. Um, yeah, jar rigs work quite well for infusions. Or you can do an inline infuser, this the same. Just need to make a little bit larger chamber than what mine does. Mine just uses the 2-inch itself, and that's not enough. So if you had to go from a 2 to a 4 and just use a 4-inch spool or something like that inline, that would probably be a little more effective, or a 6. But yeah, we'll get to it. Good deal. Okay. I'm going to scroll down. Let's see. I'm a little bit behind, a whole lot behind. But I want to know which looks best, the big and wide or big and tall or big and medium. Can you all read the big and medium, or the wide and medium better, or is that better? I think big and wide. I think last time though, I think we went big and tall. And let's see Kevin's comment there. So I don't know. What's easiest for you to see? Oh, that's fun. 3-inch column with 3 plates and running comes out usually about 185. Awesome. Now I guess you got a deflagmator on that, so you can adjust the temperature of the water going into that deflagmator and the actual flow going into it, and adjust your proof. I can put a pretty big swing in the proof of mine by just it's like crazy, man, outside all day in that. So you can adjust your proof by adjusting the temperature going in your deflagmator, and you could probably easily get 190 if you cool that water down going into that deflagmator a little bit cooler than what you're using now. So good deal. Yeah, yeah, there is some danger involved. It's easy for them to break. Like I was saying, you have to keep your infusion juices hot. I think if you use a good quality canning jar, you're not going to have an issue because basically, when you're infusing, you're operating at 200 degrees, right? And the still and everything operates right around 196 to 210 degrees, depending on where you are in the run, right? So you're not gonna, that temperature is nothing for a jar because when we can, when I do pressure canning and cooking, especially in pressure canning, it gets hotter than that. So, and you can take those jars and set them out and let them cool naturally, and they're fine. So, it's not so much that it's taking that jar out, dumping that hot liquid, and then putting the cold infusion in there or the room temperature infusion juice in there. You're gonna crack them jars a lot. So it's kind of dangerous if you do that. So try to keep your infusion juices hot. You need to keep them 150, 175 plus. That way, there's not a big temperature difference in your infusion juices and the jar itself. Oh, we talking about a little bit about distilling. What's up, brother? We're talking about mashing and distilling. And if you stick around, we're going to do a beginning to end. So we're going to talk about um, how to go get you some corn, cracked corn, and cook it and use some high temp amylase and glucoamylase, convert your starches and ferment it and have a pretty good mash that you can distill and make some pretty good corn liquor. So stick around. Doing good, brother. How's it going? I got you, brother. Yeah, it is important. And, another thing is cramping. You know, drinking pickle juice, helps a lot for cramping and stuff. So I'll definitely be drinking me some pickle juice tonight because, man, I tell you, you start getting older and you get those calf cramps. Oh, my God. Man, that I've had dislocated shoulder. And really, the only pain I felt worse than that are my migraines and stuff. And the first time I dislocated my shoulder, but man, those cramps, those cramps can get pretty bad, especially those calf cramps. Man, I wake up with those probably once every 2 or 3 months, and my God, they're yeah. As long as you get use a good quality jar, I think you're gonna and keep make sure that your infusion juice is good and hot. I think that the first thing I see is in a stuck fermentation is temperature. I tend to see more people complain about it in the fall and early winter, and they just don't realize what the ambient temperature in their rooms are or on their porch and how it's changed. But I would say temperature would be the first, and then pH would probably be the second. And that's if every time you use your yeast, do a yeast starter. Don't just dump your yeast in there and expect it to work. Take your yeast, put it in some warm water. Now, when I say warm, about 90, 95. And when you do that, it just when you put your finger under the tap, if it doesn't feel warm or it doesn't feel cold, that's going to be about 98 degrees, right? It's about the same as your body temperature. So if it doesn't feel warm to you, or it doesn't feel cold to you, that's pretty much close to your body temperature. And that's how you can get by without using thermometers. And you learn these things when you don't have all the instruments, just like the old timers did. But so, start out with something like that. Get you about a third, quarter cup of sugar, put it in your big jar, and put your yeast in there, shake it up real good, take your lid off, cover it with a towel, put it in a bowl, large bowl. That way, if and when it foams over, you won't have a big mess. And use a yeast starter that way. And that way, you know that you eliminate, was my yeast viable or not, right? So, and there's a few steps that you can use, making sure you have proper nutrients, and using an adequate amount of yeast, and making sure it's good and oxygenated when you add it. That way that you get good reproduction early on. So there's a few things that you can do that will help eliminate, but I'd say probably temperature and pH is going to be, and a lot of times it ends up being, yeast that's probably not that good anymore. It's that a lot of times, but if you just use a yeast starter every time, you'll eliminate that issue. So you'll pretty much be, checking pH and temp. Yeah, man. Love me some frying green tomatoes. Yeah, we can them up. We make sauces. Ann makes killer marinaras and pasta sauce, and we do a lot of canning, and we put up quite a few. We make a what's the salsa? We make a good salsa, and somebody's asking the other day, man, about you can take some vodka that you make and put it with your salsa, make a salsarita instead of a Bloody Mary. I call it a salsarita. And my goodness, it's so good. And make some of the best damn salsa ever anyway. And that with some homemade vodka, it's just so good, man. It's awesome. But yeah, we got, and peppers. I do a lot of peppers, banana peppers, jalapeno peppers, poblano. It's I'm telling you, if y'all have never done a poblano or had poblano peppers, it's probably one of the best damn green bell type peppers that you can put your lips to. It's a lot better flavor to me than just a regular bell pepper. It's got a lot more flavor to it. It's I would say mild to medium heat wise. It's not even a medium, but it's probably going to be a tad more than just a green pepper. But man, they're so good. And stuffed peppers, man, they make really good stuffed peppers. Going on, Colton? Yeah, it is a good time to take a shot. Let me see what I got there. Well, let's see. Yeah, I don't think I can drink that. That would be great. I'll drink this. Ah, oh, damn, I'm about out of that. Might as well just finish it off. That was some good tequila right there. Some damn good tequila. Some high proof tequila. This is about 145 here. That's good though. But it's high proof. Now I need to quit drinking this ultra high proof. It kills all the bacteria in my mouth and I get thrush. Drinking it high proof will give you thrush, man. It kills all your good bacteria in your mouth. Next thing you know, you got freaking thrush mouth. I'm not sure what we're talking about, bark or what. That might have been a conversation going on in chat. I missed something, but I don't. There's a lot of barks that are toxic too, so I don't fool with a lot of barks. I don't really, As far as tree wise, mostly what, other than like the berries or the fruits or things like that. But as far as wood wise, picking a good white oak barrel, I think having white oak is definitely the way to go. I thought I had a different little overlay here. Oh shoot. That's good, huh? Well, nope, 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 nope. That'll work all right. Probably too big. Yeah, we'll live with that. Don't get me too big. What's going on, Boogie? Actually, it will, Kevin. Good question. I just use a lot of people just use pond pumps. Those work pretty well. You can get them at Harbor Freight. Does fine. There's some that's on um, Amazon. I will say that if you know anybody that grows marijuana or something like that, or does hydroponics or something like that, if you talk to them, they'll tell you these Vivo Sun and Vivo pumps. That's what I picked up. I talked to somebody and they use these things 24/7 year round. So these are pumps that can handle being used constantly. But one thing you want to look in a pump is being able to regulate its flow. A lot of pumps just put out X amount per gallon per hour, and that's it. You just dump in, that's it. You can't adjust their flow rate. But having one that you can adjust the flow rate works pretty well, because I'd rather adjust my pump than have it trying to force water into a valve that I've adjusted on my thumper. A lot of these thumpers will have a valve on the top and bottom. I have no earthly idea why there's a fucking valve on the top. What purpose does that serve? You adjust the flow coming in with the valve on the bottom. You want your water to come in on the bottom, right? And you adjust the flow on the bottom. You want it to drain just as fast as it can when it gets up to the level where the drain is. Absolutely no purpose for the valve there. They're just wasting money. Is silly. But if you were to enclose it, you still don't want it, because you're just forcing it out at the rate that it's coming in. So, but yeah, having a pump that you can adjust the flow rate, that way you don't have to open up and close that valve and have your pump pushing as hard as it can working, and probably burn your pump out because it's just not able to pump enough water to keep itself cool. So, it may put back pressure on the pump or something like that and cause early failure. But being able to adjust your pump, flow rate is a big plus. But yeah, I use Vivo, and they're a little bit more expensive, but seems to do just fine. And I think they're usually green. What's up, brother? Yeah, I'm an old hillbilly. Yeah, yeah, deflag definitely helped on the cap. Wayne makes those at Ozark. I think he's one of the first people that I've seen that actually incorporates a deflagmator inside the actual cap. I think that's a Wayne at Ozark Steelworks original idea and one of his inventions, and works great. So yeah, something like that works well. In the old timers, just simple as putting cold towels on a big cap works. Help cool that cap off. They also noted a lot that when it rained, that their proof went up, and then they finally realized, hey, it's cooling that cap off. So, some of them would just pour a little water over the cap from time to time to cool it off and increase their, reflux. And then some people put cold towels on there. They soak them in cold water, just lay them on top of that cap and get a little extra reflux. Once it got hot, they'd pick it off and get another cold towel and put on there, and they would get more reflux that way. And, and but yeah, you can put a deflagmator inside the cap itself, and that works real well. I'm trying to think of what Wayne calls them. I can't remember. My mind. I should remember. It's not Terminator, but it's something like that. But they work really well. But yeah, you can put a regular, shotgun condenser if you've got like 2-inch spools, or you got a short shotgun condenser. You can use that as a deflagmator. That works perfectly well. So if you got like a little small shotgun condenser that came with a small steel setup and you've got a larger one now, you could take that little shotgun and set it on your column and use that as your deflagmator. Works perfectly fine. That's what I've done and it works great. Are you ready to move, brother? That's awesome, man. You'll be here before long. Watch out, Tennessee. Frank's on the way. Good to hear, brother. You'll be closer to us and we'll be able to meet at some of these events and festivals. Yeah, I know. It's tough. As long as you can see me, it's probably less of me. I wish I could make the comments bigger. I've already talked to them and it's in the works. They're working on it. They're probably I'm hoping they'll make one just cover the whole side of this screen, right? So the whole, right side of the screen can be comments. So I keep telling them every week and they'll eventually do it. And I think, I started requesting that a few months ago. Well, about a few months ago. That it would be nice if comments could be inside the actual chat window because cross-platform people couldn't see. So only people on YouTube could see the YouTube comments. People on Facebook could only see the Facebook comments, and that's if you were on that Facebook page. So if you were watching it from Philbilly Moonshine, on Facebook and something was done in the militia or Distilling 101, you wouldn't be able to cross read it. So now everybody can read everything and that should, so hopefully we can get them to enlarge it even more because I think it's, for our purposes, it works great. And let's see, at 9 o'clock and it's 9:14, not too bad, not too bad. And again, I say, if you've got a question out there, please be patient and wait for me to get to it. Don't get mad and leave it. I want to give everybody equal opportunity, equal time. So just be patient. I will get to you if I miss something, and you say, well, hell, he just skipped right over me. I'm very sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. And if you ask that question again, just say, all right, dumbass, you missed my question. You skipped right over me. I'm gonna ask it again. So let me know. Don't get mad at me. Yeah, if you could have other jars ready and heat it up, that'd be an awesome idea. I never even really thought about that. But yeah, if you could have them in a microwave and heat those suckers up to where you get that infusion bubbling and that jar getting hot, just pop it right in there. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Be a great way to do it. Never really thought about that, Scott. You see, you thinking outside that box. I like that. What's going on, Mike? Good to see you, brother. Oh, well, oh, I see. I see how it is. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Is that what you're talking about? Is that the best? Yeah, that's the way we need it right there. I've got to do it like this. Wait a minute, shit. Damn it, Mike. How did I have it? Oh, that's too big. Yeah, that's good. No, too big. Yeah, that'd be right there. I got to do it like this for those lip readers, right? Yeah. Some of these people read my lips. What about the fruit on it? I think somebody was calling it the strawberry tree or something. So it has some fruit, but the berries are safe. Okay, good. I'll tell you what. What do you use to cook your corn in or steep your corn in? I found those big ass coolers are perfect for steeping a big old batch of corn mash or mixed grain. It's good because that's the most important thing when you're steeping instead of cooking. Cooking is great and it's probably the best way to do it, but you run the risk of scorching your grains. So if you can just boil water, then we're going to get into that here in a minute when we do the beginning to end. But if you got a big ass cooler like that, It's awesome for steeping your grains in because it maintains that heat for so long and it doesn't cool off quickly. And that's one of the biggest problems with using like a barrel or something like that. They cool off pretty quickly, unless you do like I did. You take a 55-gallon barrel and you put you some cut foam in the bottom, styrofoam in the bottom. Set that a smaller barrel inside that, and then foam around the outside, or just pack insulation of not fiberglass, but foam insulation. Of you can use plastic, peanuts, whatever. Pack it around the outside, and that'll help insulate and hold that temp. But nothing beats a big ass cooler. So if you got a big ass cooler, those are perfect for steeping your grains in. And another good thing for water circulation is just if you live in an area that has a pretty mild everyday temperature in 70s or 80s, get you a big tote and rig it to one of your gutters to hold it. And once it gets to a certain level, then you could have a overflow where once it gets to a certain level, you can have it flow out and put your screens in there so you don't get mosquitoes you know start to live in there. But totes make real good because they hold so much water. If you have a pretty good steel and you need some pretty good flow rate, you can just basically, if you have a couple totes, it's even best because you can take it out of one tote cold and feed it into another hot, and then next time go the other way, and just keep them both filled that way. Works well. And you get those totes cheap. I mean, a lot of places pretty much almost give them to you. Right. Yeah, they've got them in the Pacific Northwest. I think somebody's asked about those before. It might have been you, but somebody we were talking about different fruits and stuff, I think mentioned that before because it was uh, it was foreign to me and I had no idea what it was. And again, my mind, but I'm pretty sure I Googled it and found out that they were in the Pacific Northwest, but I think they were calling it by a different name. And I think it's in the same family as that tree. Yeah. And that's the best way to do it. I don't even use ice cubes, man. I'd get 2 liters and just put them in there, leave you a good gap so it doesn't split them or bust them. You can use milk jugs just the same, give them room, and those will help a lot, and just keep your reservoir cool, and that works well. But really, the only temperature I watch on my steel, period, is the temperature in my reservoir, and that's going in. I try to keep it at about 60, 65 if I can. Yeah, Vivo, and let me. In fact, I will Google. I'll look on Amazon to see which exactly the one I got. I think it might be Vivo Sun or some shit. I think they make lights and all kinds of shit. No. It is Vivo Sun. Yeah, it's Vivo Sun, and on the front it's got a $24. It's a 800 gallon per hour, which is more than you need. But it's got a little adjustable thing on the intake, so you can move it and adjust the flow rate. And those Vivo Suns, a lot of people use them, like I say, in the hydroponics industry, and run them up 24/7 all year long. So they're a good solid pump for the money. Now I'm sure you could probably get one for half that price that does as much, but it might not have the adjustable flow rate at Harbor Freight or something. Maybe you'll find one that does. Um, but I do know those things will last for years and years, and on a heavy duty cycle. And it is Vivo Sun. I'm sorry, Vivo Sun. And they also make lights and a lot of other stuff for certain industries. But there's one that's a Pulaco, That's $18. It does 400 gallons per hour. And here's one that's Gronier. That's just some crazy names that they put on them in China, and it's $18, 17.99. That's on sale. So I'm going with Vivo. For 5 to 6, $8 more. Yeah, that's $6 more. It's 25% more than yeah. And I'd say it's going to definitely be worth it for sure. And there's some that look just like it that are Chinese that are knockoffs that are $21. So yeah, I'm going with the Vivo. Vivo Sun 800 GPH submersible pump, ultra quiet water fountain pump, and they have a good head too. A lot of them you'll have to gauge them because I think the pump that came with my Bever was a small pump, and I was using a reservoir down on the floor, and I was using it for my deflegmator, which was probably 6 feet up in the air, and it didn't have the umph to pump the water up there at any good flow rate. So yeah, get you a good pump. And those 50 Suns, they have a good warranty, and they're the bomb. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Blowing an air on your big cap. You got that big whiskey cap or your column. Absolutely. Blowing some air on it definitely helps for sure. Absolutely. Now, that was a discussion a long time ago. A redneck can live anywhere, and but a hillbilly, you got to pretty much be in the hills. So Appalachia, I guess, was generally known as hillbilly, but I don't know. Maybe you got some of them hillbillies down there in the Ozarks. I went down there a couple weeks ago, and I reckon they could be considered hillbillies too. They're pretty good people down there. I like them. They remind me of a lot of the people at home. But yeah, I'd say yeah, geographical. If you're in the mountains, it's strange, but some AI considers hillbilly a derogatory term. And damn, nobody ever told me that. I've been calling myself a hillbilly for a long time. I don't know. Is that bad? No, I stream on Phil Billy's, man. Phil Billy, he provides us and he sponsors us and he pays for the StreamYard, the software that we're using. So about $100 a month, not cheap. So he he provides the software and I stream to his channels, and that's my way of thanking him, and his channel's my channel. So if you want to get on there and like and follow, he's got lots of great videos on there, and I'm on there, so it can't get any better. Me and Phil Billy on the same channel, man. You got it. And Ian will even be on there once in a while. So yeah, I just go through him. He's my brother, man. I support him, and he helps us out with providing us with the stream yards, and I could get it for free and all that, but he helps me and I help him, and it's a match made in heaven, man. We help each other out, and any way I can help my brother, man, I will. He's a great guy. You got to meet him. He's awesome. Got a big heart. You won't meet a better person than old Phil. So if he gets a few dollars out of the hits or something, or the likes or whatever, whatever, I know it ain't as much as what he's paying for this software every month, and even if it is, more power to him. I'm not in it to try to make a buck. If he can, more power to him. I just enjoy helping people and getting on here and answering questions and meeting brothers, and making the hobby safe for everybody, and trying to pass on a little bit of knowledge before I'm no longer with y'all. So that's my way of giving back. Thanks for asking, bro. Yeah, rednecks were people that worked out in the sun, usually in the fields, and they got a redneck by keeping their head down and working all day, and they were usually the ones with red arms, white above the sleeve. But hillbilly, I don't know. I think both those terms may have come from England and Ireland and a lot of those places. Yeah, man, I like having a lot of fun, man. If you can't laugh and make it fun, we can be serious because it is a serious hobby, and when it comes to safety and talking about toxic things and stuff like that, I'll tend to get a little bit more serious. But I try to cut up and have a good time and keep it jovial, and people tend to enjoy it a lot more. They don't want to listen to somebody serious and talk about serious stuff, and it'd be real easy to just come in here and talk about politics and hate and hate and hate, and people get enough of that everywhere else, man. I like having keeping things light and happy and fun and laughing. Even at myself, I laugh at myself more than anybody. Yeah, that works. Yeah, anything that you can do to help insulate, works great. I've seen people do that. I've seen people use like these water beds, heaters that you used to put on the bottom of the water beds, and they wrap their barrels in that, and that seems to work. There's a lot of things that you can do to help keep it warm. But yeah, you definitely, when you steep, if you do have a big ass cooler, nothing works better than a big 110 quart 96 or 110 or 20, whatever kind of big, the bigger the better, depending on the size of your mash. But definitely coolers are really good for holding heat, just like they hold the coolness, they'll hold heat too. So they're awesome for steeping. And we're going to get into steeping here in just a little bit, and you'll find out why it's so important. Because when you do the steeping method, you have to keep, you only use a certain percentage of your water initially, right? So if you're doing a 10-gallon mash with 10 gallons of water, 25 pounds of corn, or 20 gallons of water and 50 pounds of corn, which is about a 2.5 pounds per gallon, which is a pretty decent rate. Some go two, some go three. 2.5 seems to be a pretty happy medium where you can get a good gravity. I talked to somebody earlier today. They were doing three and they got a 108 plus, 108.5 almost. And that's great. And I was just using the steep method and the high temp amylase and the glucose, like, I preach, and they followed the instructions. Like, wow, it did great. So love to hear that. So, but when you're doing like this, I'll say 10 because I think that's just small amount that most people are making. So when you do 10, you're only going to start with 8 gallons of water, and you're going to start mixing all your corn into that. And then over the next hour and a half, 90 minutes, you're going to slowly add a little bit so that hot boiling water into there to maintain that 185 degrees, 190 degrees that we need to gelatinize the corn, right? So, having that cooler makes it to where you don't have to add as much, and over a long period of time it holds that heat better, so you don't have to babysit it quite so much as you would if you're losing temperature quicker. So, but we'll get into all that here in just a little bit for sure. Awesome. Yeah, yeah, definitely adjustable pump helps a lot, definitely for sure. I miss seeing y'all down in Arkansas this year. Yeah, what's the best way to make your mash ferment faster? Temp use. Um, you really don't want to rush it. You just can't. Um, keeping all your variables right on a grain mash, you're going to be 3, 4, 5 days if you do everything that we say and keep the temperatures up and the ambient temperature and the temperature of the mash, and if you do everything right, yeah, 3 to 5 days. Yeah, if you don't get it any quicker than that, they're mad at the big distilleries. They do huge amounts in 3 or 4 days. They're ready to go. They don't fool around. They get that 1060, 1065, boom, boom, bang, run it, go next. So grain washes, and it depends, like we said at the very beginning, different type mashes, different type washes, different type musts will be different times, and there's nothing that you can do to speed them up. And it's just like the aging process. You can't really speed it up to get quite the same thing. And it's going to be the same thing with mashing, but keeping all the variables finely tuned will definitely be the best thing that you can do to get it done in the quickest manner possible without messing things up. But yeah, if you're in the cold season, bringing it inside and keeping it warm, keeping it next close to your heaters, keeping it warm, not too warm. Take your temperature. That's another temperature that you want to keep. That's not, a distilling temp, but measure the temperature of your mash. Get you a good thermometer that drop it down in there. And if you got one that floats, that's great. Just leave it in there, and just check it from time to time and make sure that got a proper temperature. Um, but you don't want to add more yeast. That's just going to ruin your flavor. You get too much yeast and it'll just mess with your flavor. Keeping a proper nutrition, keeping the pH buffered, with our oyster shells. There's a lot of things that you can do, and crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's will, if you can keep everything within the tolerances, that will be your fastest way. And you just don't really want to go any faster than that, because then you start getting off flavors. You get too hot, your yeast will stress. Not enough nutrients, it'll stress. Too low a pH, it'll stress. When it stresses, it's going to start creating off flavors. Yeah, I think we can call you all hillbillies down there. I don't think so either. I always thought redneck was generally, you know, synonymous with an asshole, whereas hillbilly was just somebody that grew up in the hills. Somebody's a redneck, they're an asshole. And if they're just a hillbilly, they're just a hillbilly, right? So I think it might be, people see it a little different. Depends on where you're from. I mean, if you're a hillbilly, you got to have something different to call an asshole. So, you know, but I think a lot of places have different meanings. That's right. Hit that thumbs up. Hit that little heart button. Love and follow. Definitely follow us. And on YouTube, I get notifications a lot quicker every time I log in on here. Ding ding. That Philbilly Moonshine on YouTube and the Militia on YouTube. I'll get that notification in a heartbeat. But the Facebook, even from my own Distilling 101 group, I very rarely get it. And I've set up for notifications and I still don't get it. So Facebook doesn't get it. But yeah, man, appreciate it. Yeah, I know. I'm gonna try. You better believe. What's going on, Mike? Well, I hope y'all gotten any. Man, did you see? Are you on that? I don't know if you're in that group or not. There was a record broke in Ohio this past few days. Man, it was massive looking buck. It was big. I'm trying to find it. Remember the damn name of the group. I can't remember anything anymore. Let's see what group that is. I know Roy and a bunch of them run it. Actually, I just posted that buck in there so you can see it. If you're not in there, join up. Buckeye Outdoor Innovations. So they make a lot of deer feed and a lot of experimental stuff that they're working on, and a bunch of good guys. So if you're not a member there, join up. If you're a big hunter, if you love hunting, and you live in the Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee area, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, any in that area, join them up. They make good products too. They make really good supplements to deer feeds and stuff that you can add to your corn and stuff, and attractants. And they're awesome, good guys too. Part of the moonshine community, good people. And Roy is very knowledgeable as far as corn and grains. And yeah, him and Sean Peterman, they both used to work in the grain industry. Roy Carruthers and Sean Peterman both used to work in the grain industry and at grain houses and stuff. So very knowledgeable when it comes to grain, and yeah, good people. Good people for sure. They come to a lot of our festivals and stuff, and good people to hang around, shoot the shit with. They're all hunters too. Yeah, I know. It's always something, brother. For me too. I was really blessed and glad that I was able to make it down for the second year in a row. I love it down there. It's a great place. Those people are awesome. They remind me of the people back home so much, and it was a good time. We got to go downtown and do the scare in the square, and to see all the kids and dressed up. Saw a lot of creative costumes, a lot of interesting costumes down there. And we got to hang out down there. It was a good time. Let's see. Got to hang out with Ruby Lee, the yodeling cowgirl. So she sang at the Moonshine Music Festival down there in Clinton, Arkansas, this a couple of weeks ago. And if you're not familiar with her, she was on The Voice. I think she got second place on The Voice. Probably should have won. But man, she can sing and yodel. Got a big voice, big heart. She's awesome. People got to meet her whole family and talk with them. And Damon did an interview with them while we were sitting there, and just good, down to earth, awesome people, and was a real good time. And I think he might like that moonshine a little bit too, her dad. But she's 18, 19, so she didn't get a sample any. But thinking her dad might like some of that. Yeah, steep it. I've done both. I've cooked it, I've scorched it, and I found that you can do just as well steeping it as cooking it if you got a good cooker. I know some people use double boilers. Uh, some people have found that using a double boiler system works pretty well, and it'll prevent you from scorching it. And I think that's a pretty good route to go. It's definitely a good way to prevent it from scorching. I will say that. But it's only for people that have a pot like that. Not everybody has a couple of big pots that they can. It's kind of like a double boiler for doing the sugar thing, you know, and but it'll do it, and we've talked about that before for years. I've talked about it, and trying to think my buddy's name, Michael Melrose. He does a double boiler, and he gets good results from it. And you got a boiling pot underneath, and then you got a pot of your corn and water sitting inside that, right? With just something keeping it up off the bottom. So you got boiling water around it. I'm sure probably takes a little bit longer initial heat up, but it'll keep that temperature up as well or better than definitely a cooler, right? So doing it that way would definitely works out pretty well. But yeah, I like steeping because I get tired of getting a bunch of good grains, get some heirloom corn or something like that. And you got a lot of money invested in it, and some of the malts and stuff, and then if I can scorch it and ruin everything, man, nothing pisses you off more than just having to pitch it, because there's really, once you scorch the shit out of it, there's not much you can do. So I've gotten to where I'm just use a big cooler and steep in it, or my big you know barrel that's wrapped up. That works pretty well. Aquarium heaters, those are okay, but I've seen a lot of people now. A lot of people use those not for cooking and not for steeping and maintaining, but for like the keeping your mash at a certain temperature. I've seen a lot of people go to all the trouble of mashing in, getting everything done right, and then they sit that heater in there, and overnight it scorches, and they pull it out, and it's got all kinds of black corn stuck to it. There's nothing worse, man. I use I use a a heater. They're these little radiator heaters that are oil filled. You can get them. They're pretty cheap. I put that around 3 or 4 barrels, and man, that works about as good as anything. It's down here in the basement, so it's about 60 some degrees down here. And when I need the heater, it's going to be 60, 55, 65 degrees in that range. It gets a little cool in this basement too. Um, so I just put that heater right in the middle of those barrels, and I'll go in and turn them every day, a little bit, about, from 12 to 3, a quarter turn every day. And that way it doesn't get a hot side and a cold side. I guess you turn it halfway around, whatever. But those things work real well, and I've never scorched anything using those. Uh, and they regulate temperature pretty well too. So it's a good safe. If they get knocked over, they shut down. You don't have some glowing elements that can get wet and explode and go everywhere and cause fires. It's just a good even heat. It doesn't make things doesn't dry stuff out a lot like those open coil things do as well. So it doesn't dry my skin out using them, which I tend to get when I've got dry skin as it is, man. When the heaters come on, that heat pump, it gets cold, that emergency coil kicks in, and man, I'll just turn into it like a little scab, man. I'll be picking skin, and it gets drier than hell, man. I hate it. So, and then you got to break out the humidifiers and all that. But yeah, I've seen some good mashes run with aquarium heaters, and I've seen some people with some success. But really, if you start doing barrels, yeah, get you an oil field and just set it right in the middle of 3 or 4 barrels. It'll keep them all just the same. And if it gets too hot, space it a little further away, and keep it a foot away from it so it doesn't really get too hot. And then just turn them, every day, and you can regulate it right there on that dial. Well, it's not sitting there right now. I guess it's in the laundry room, but I keep it right there in that laundry room with a few barrels, and it works real well. Seen a few little ones, huh? So when I go hunting, I generally do two things. I'm either going, my first deer is going to be a doe. I see a big doe, she's gone. Period. The end, dead, gone. Because that's meat, that's food. And then once I get the food, then I can be a little more selective on the next one. I can hunt for horns. But, I'm primarily out there for food. So after I get that food, then I can, get that freezer food, and then I can go for some horns. Clam and prawns. But those oyster shells do work well. That's awesome, man. Yeah, actually, I think Toby had some honey corn mixed down there in Arkansas that we got to try. I might have brought a little bit home with me. Yeah, Toby, I got you, honey shine. But it was real good. Toby does a good job, man. He has some corn liquor about as good as any corn liquor I've tasted, and except of course my own. Yeah, he makes some really good corn liquor for sure. It went quick. I was hoping to bring some of that home, and that went pretty quick. Yeah, honey's good, and I like oat. I use a lot of oats. I'll throw in oats in all my grain bills. And there was a time there, and I wouldn't even count them. I did 3 grain, little wheat, little corn, little barley, and I threw 3 or 4 handfuls of oats in there just for mouthfeel mostly. But I wasn't even counting. Like, well, I guess it was 4 grain. Maybe I should start counting those. I don't know why I never did. Oh yeah, we're going to get to that, John. So generally, you want to use 2.5 pounds of corn, anywhere from 2 to 3 pounds of grain. I won't just say corn; I'll say grains per gallon. Now, if you start getting high wheat content or high rye content, when you're going to start getting into a lot of glutens and getting real thick gluteny, You can use the Sebflow and the Sebvisco to, I usually got Clinton here telling everybody about that. But I don't know what happened to old Clinton now. I hope he's doing all right. I called him earlier and he didn't answer, so kind of worried about my boy. He's a big help in here. But for a gallon of water, 2.5 is what I try to do. Um, so, but when I start doing the steeping method, for example, 50-pound bag of corn, I'm using 20 gallons of water, right? And I've got 20 gallons of water boiling. And as I'm adding, a gallon or two to the cooler, I'm stirring that in. I'm adding, a few pounds of corn to that. And then by the time I get to, about 16, 17 gallons in the cooler, then I'm dumping the remainder of the corn in there. I'm going to stir the shit out of it. And then I'm going to look at my clock. And then I'm wanting to look at the temperature. So I'll add enough, hot water to keep that mash at 185 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And as it gets a little cooler, it gets to about 175, 80. I'm going to add another bit of hot water to that cooler, stir it in, check temperature. Okay, it's back up to 185. I'm going to check it every 15, 20 minutes unless I get sidetracked. But the best thing about a cooler is you can check it less often because it holds the heat really well. If you're in a barrel, you're going to have to stay on it. And you might have to keep a little extra water off to the side too. But so you just keep adding that water, and keep adding it and keep adding it to keep that temperature at 185 for 90 minutes to 2 hours. And once it gets good and gelatinized, you'll know it. And then you're good to add your high temp amylase and stir that in good. And then you'll notice it immediately start thinning out. And that's a good thing. So once you do that, I guess we'll just go ahead and do our how to. So basically, we've gotten there. We got 20 gallons of water. We're going to do a 50-pound bag of corn. So if you want to do half a bag with 10 gallons, you can do the same thing. Just keep, a couple of gallons out. That way you can keep adding it back into it to keep that temperature up. After 90 minutes to a couple hours at 185, 90, you will have gelatinized corn, good cracked corn. And the finer the grind, usually the more starch you're going to get out of it. Might be a little more headache down the road when it comes to time to clear, but you can get a little bit better conversion out of it. Most cracked corn isn't fine enough, and cornmeal's too fine. So you want somewhere in between. Get something, with kind of a coarse grind, I would say, would be the best way. Um, but yeah, that's one of the best ways to cook your corn is just to steep it like that and gelatinize it that way. Put your high temp amylase in there, then you're going to stir it up real good. It'll start thinning out on you, and then you just let it naturally start cooling. If you have, let's say if it's a 20-gallon with a whole bag of corn, 50-pound bag of corn in there, and you've got maybe a gallon of water left at the end and that you didn't use, you can take that gallon of water, pitch it, and you can get you some good cold water, a gallon, and dump that in there and help start cooling the process down a little cooler. But just make sure that you maintain that temperature. And if you have any water left over, you can add that cold water in there, and that'll help cool it down a little quicker because it'll be some wait time. That's one thing about the cooler. It holds temperature well when you need it, but sometimes it's too fast. So when you're done gelatinizing the corn, a lot of times people will go ahead and transfer it from a cooler to a barrel because that cooler's holding the temperatures too long, almost. They're too efficient. But a nice cool down period gets you through your rest. There's a lot of rest, protein rest, saccharification rest, that when you slow down, cool and slow, you lower your temperature slowly, you get these proper resting periods that cut down on proteins. They're good for saccharification rest. And you get your saccharification rest, and you'll see it in my charts that I use all the time. Let me find my chart here. I need to get into this anyway. So we're going to, hopefully, I'm not going to miss out on any questions because I do want to dive into the beginning to end, because that's something that I promised, and I did. I've got some beginners watching. A lot of times they don't chime in because they're afraid to. They don't want people to know that they're watching. They want to remain anonymous, and so I did promise that I'm going to do a beginning to end today. But if you notice when you see this chart and any of these charts, you can find them in DIY Shine and stuff, or in the militia page in their files. I put them all in there. But let me hide this a little bit, and let me hide that. So you'll notice it goes from like 145 to 155. That's your saccharification rate, resting period, and temperatures, not period, temperatures. Um, so if you could hold in that range, it will help in your conversion. Also, making sure that your pH of the water that you're adding while you're steeping is 5.3, and you can do that by adding citric acid or lemon juice or whatever. Citric acid probably the cheapest thing you can use, but having that good acidic, that 5.3 acidic level will help in your conversions too. So it's not just to help keep bacteria down; it's actually helps in your conversion. So and barrel and barrel with insulated barrel and barrel, it's great, and it'll help. The actual fermentation process is exothermic, means it creates its own heat. So as the fermentation process is going on, it creates its own ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. So, and that's energy coming off. Adenosine triphosphate, and that is the energy that's created within the cell that gives off energy and heat. So that's why it's exothermic. So anytime you have a chemical reaction going on that's giving off heat, it's ATP. That's the energy that the fermentation is actually creating. So um, they do create their own heat, and if you can keep it in insulated, it depends on temperatures. If it gets real cold, it's still not going to work. But if you have a good insulated barrel and barrel like I was talking about, and like Cyrus talks about, definitely helps. Yeah, that's like a double boiler. Yeah, yeah. That's a good idea. Yeah, I've not heard of that. I do know that it'll also, a little Pam, or a little vegetable oil or butter will help keep your foam down too when you distill. So I'm gonna try to field some of these questions before I carry on with where we were. We'll get that back up there, and we'll get that out of there. Um, cool. Yeah, that'll work. So you want to distill on the grain. Now, I will say, when you want to distill on the grain with those grain baskets in your pot, make sure that you rinse all the fine particulates off, and sparge it off there real well. Just keep recirculating some of the mash water over it, and get a lot of the fine grain meal off there. That way it's not will come off in your pot and scorch. But yeah, they work well. And in fact, I've got a false bottom on my Bever 18 and a half that I'm going to use. I've not distilled on the grain with it yet, but I've got a brew bag, and I'm going to suspend it in there, and I've got a false bottom with a plate. So I'm going to try to do a little corn uh, and see how that works out. Right? Yeah, yeah. That's the way this one is. It's like 3 or 4 inches off the bottom. It's pretty good distance. So yeah, that's awesome. That sounds nice, brother. Is that in the spring? 1.004. Yeah, she's about done. And also, sometimes with molasses, you may not get lower than that unless you add a lot of glucose. So, because there's some unfermentables in that molasses. So, and some people like to run it when it's still a little sweet. I mean, that's almost dry. I mean, that's not a 010, that's not an 005. That's getting pretty close to zeroed, right? So sometimes people like to run it when it's a little sweeter, and you'll notice a little bit difference in flavor. So yeah, after something like that, they work out pretty well because with that molasses, it just might not get any lower than that unless you add a lot of glucose. Because molasses has some what they call limit dextrins in it, and it's just like trisaccharides. It's like three bonded molecules of glucose together, and the yeast just can't eat them. And you add that glucose, and it'll help make it to where you can ferment drier with that molasses. Yeah, honey ain't cheap. Unless you know a beekeeper. Yeah, and honey, it's kind of like that, kind of like tequila, you know, with that blue agave. It's that stuff is expensive too, man. Right, in your brew pot, yeah. But in my still, I'm gonna try to distill on the grain. Well, okay, I thought you were talking about in your steel pot. That would be, something to think about too. Sparge all that off and try to do your coarse grains. But I tell you what, one of the secrets is, and don't tell anybody, but I don't know, it's getting pretty popular. I've told a lot of people, and I'm not the one that came up with it, but using cream corn or sweet corn that's pureed real well in your thumpers or in your infusers when you're doing like a corn liquor, man, it'll help add a lot of good corn flavor. I'd say as much so as distilling on the grain would. Second week in January. Sounds good, brother. Unless there's ice on the road, I'll make it. I thought about doing beekeeping too until I read about it and found out how much work it is. I thought you just put the damn things out there and let the bees do their own thing and then go out and every once in a while and just take the honey out. Oh, no, there's a lot more work to it than that. So I think about that. Yeah, it likes the warmer temperatures. Tequila likes the ferments, warm ferments, and in the 90s. So 85 to 90. We were talking about that earlier. It likes it warm. That tequila does. So summertime, you know, down there in Arkansas, them hot summer days. Yeah, yeah, man, it's probably a good time to try it. Yeah, that's not cheap. And that's good too. That ferments very well. The sugarcane juice ferments very well. It'll ferment probably better than molasses because once you cook it and you turn it golden, then you make some complex sugars out of the simple sugars. That's like when you're making, if you want to make a simple syrup, a lot of people like to use or inverted sugar, which is a simple syrup, inverted sugar. You got to be careful not to get your sugar golden or overcooked because it will make some monosaccharides and some disaccharides into some polysaccharides, and then you got to worry about converting those back. So you got to add glucose to get them back to disaccharides and monosaccharides. So you don't want to defeat the purpose. Now that sounds like a beer maker. Have you made a lot of beer, John? A lot of beer makers, that's the way they do it. They don't ferment on grain. They sparge it. They get their flavors. They get rid of that shit and just ferment without it. And I can see pluses to both sides. It definitely makes a really good clear wash. Instead of a mash, it becomes, I guess, a wash. Because there's no grain in there, and it's a good clean wash. Um, So yeah, there's some pros and cons probably to that. I don't know how much flavor you might lose by not fermenting on the grain. Uh, if you're beer making for sure, it's definitely going to be much more beneficial. And if you are a beer maker, you understand what I'm talking about with the protein rest and the saccharification rest. I hadn't had too much to drink. I was able to say that, but yeah, I figured. I've never done a lot of beers other than just mashes because I've never been a big beer drinker. But I love the dark beers over in Europe and stuff. When I went over there, um, really liked it. A lot of people drinking; they were all going crazy over it. So I'm not really a beer drinker, so I'm all right. I'll try it. And so man, it was really good. I love the dark beers, and it was warm. I figured I'd hate that as well, but yeah. Yeah, corn's good. And a lot of people, the beer makers don't use corn, so that's new for a lot of people, beer drinkers. Anyway, we're going to get back to where we were. So after you steep your corn, and you get a good gelatinous, and you on the grain for whiskey and off the grain for beer. That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard. But I just don't have that experience, Jim, with making the beer. So I can only assume that I'm thinking it would probably be a little bit more and distilling on grain. So if you can ferment on grain and distill on grain and use the cream corn in your infusers, I think that I'm definitely going to make better corn liquor than Toby ever dreamed of. But Toby makes some good corn liquor. I ain't going to take nothing away from that boy. Makes some damn good corn liquor. Right. All right. So we've gelatinized our corn, right? And we're now getting ready to allow it to cool down. I'll pull my chart up that I had just a second ago. I'll just put it right back up there. Now, as it cools down, you really need this chart, and it's a good chart to put on your phone or have with you as you're doing this because you'll always refer to it. Because I can't remember all these temperatures, especially when you're doing multi grains, right? So if you look into this chart, you'll see like wheat right in the middle there, and rye right in the middle. So wheat, you'll know it goes right into the center of your saccharification rest, right? And so does barley malt. And so if you're adding wheat and barley, right in the middle of that at about 150 degrees is a perfect time to add your barley, your malted barley, your malted wheats. Rye can wait a little bit cooler, but if it's not malted dry, it ain't going to hurt a damn thing to put it in that same temperature as well. If it's malted dry, you want to wait a little bit and probably put it in at about 135, 40. But most of these, you'll see most of these different grains, you can add them in this saccharification range. So as your corn mash cools. Now, this isn't a step, in beer making, they do it just the opposite because they don't deal with corn. They tend to start and they increase temperature. So they're adding different increase ingredients as the temperatures increase, right? So it's kind of backwards to beer making this way. And there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. You can do it that way as well and do your other grains like you would a beer and just cook your corn and combine them when you're done. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that either. That works quite well, in fact. So either way, this chart you can get off of it's in the Moonshine Militia in the file section, and it's also in the DIY Shine and Stuff page in the file section. And if you can't find it there, I can share it with you on Facebook and Messenger. Let me find you, Jim. And let's see here. Let me pull that chart up out of my list here. Anybody else wants it on Facebook, I can pull you up. Let's see here. Let me get to. And if you don't mind, Jim, I'm going to throw a bunch of good charts at you real quick here, brother. that I think you'll enjoy having. There's one. And I don't mind doing this for anybody. So if you're on Facebook, I can share it on YouTube. I ain't quite figured that shit out yet. So you'll have to bear with me. I don't know how to do it on Facebook. But there's another chart. And let's see here. Here's a diastatic power of different grain chart that you might find handy. I don't think I should. This one's a little bit different. Now this fruit one I just gave you, it's a large range for some fruits because fruits, depending on the ripeness and type and variety, can vary considerably on their sugar content. So yeah, that's a pretty good. Here, I'll throw a wood toasting chart guide in there for you. There's just some basic charts that I find very handy, all the way into aging and everything. So if anybody else wants those, just holler at me and I can. No problem, Jim. I can send them to you, but I got to have your Facebook so I can do it via Messenger. We don't have to be friends, but you should be my friend already. So, but yeah, I can shoot them to you. All right. All right. Send me a message, Mash Bro, and good deal, Jim. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, I think I got you. How the hell we not friends already, Mash Bro? All right. Let's see. All right, shooting charts. All right, there's your toast and char guide. Here is the gelatinous, that chart. And I keep all these on my phone because I'm getting old and I can't remember shit anymore. And it's great to have these on there. Diastatic power chart. Let's see here. And this is kind of a guide to how much fruit. Again, it'll vary depending on the fruit, the variety, and the ripeness. This is a boiling point thing for. It's good to have. It explains a lot for people that don't understand the azeotropes and how it how depending on the amount of alcohol and water, the boiling point will change. Let's see in here. If I send you the same one twice, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to make sure you get all the good ones. Yeah, I think that one actually may be focused a little better than the other one I sent you. There's another one over here, though. Yeah, I think that's it. Let me check this. Make sure. Yeah. Wait a minute. Yeah, you got that. All right. So, anybody else? Send me a miss. Hey, Tammy, how you doing? All right, so got you, brother. If anybody else wants them, just message me on Facebook and just make a note. We don't have to be friends. If I see a note that says, you know, from Distilling 101, send me those charts, please, or something to that effect, I get you. Says Miss Tammy this evening. You having a good weekend? I'm doing great. I got out and did a little work today. I thought I was going to be sore and cranky, but I'm feeling pretty good. So I got a little sore elbow, and it's been sore for a long time, but my knee's a little bit sore, but I'll live. I'll take my potassium and drink my pickle juice tonight, and I'll be doing good. I don't get cramps, and I won't have them sore muscles. So we're now back to waiting on our cooling temps, and that's why I had the chart up there. So as we get to the 155 to 150 degrees, you'll see that here your barley malt is in there, um, your wheat's in there. Your rye is going to be a little bit cooler, but if it's not malted, you can add it right in there. It's not what's the worst thing it can happen? It denature the enzymes that aren't activated and used anyway. Pickle back. Oh, well, actually, pickle juice will help you keep from getting cramps. Works real well. So every once in a while, when you get old and start getting, especially calf cramps, man, I get these calf cramps, and they're just, my God, man, you just wake up with them in bed. It's just like, oh my goodness. Yeah, I just keep working that elbow. I shake it off. I just kind of do that, work it off and shake it off and rub it. And it's been sore for, well, we had a flood and my basement flooded, and I had to use a wet and dry vac. Me and Ann used wet and dry vac to keep the water from accumulating, so I didn't get a lot of stuff ruined. I got everything up out of the floor as best I could, but once it gets a foot deep, I can't do anything. So we had it where it's a couple inches deep, and we did our best to just wet vac, and I did this motion right here, wet vac, on carpet and on the floor and everywhere in this basement for 26 hours straight, nonstop, in a panic, trying to keep everything from getting ruined down here because I let a lot of shit down here in the basement, and it hasn't felt good ever since then. I don't know if it's like tennis elbow or whatever, but man, it's been sore ever since. And every time I think it's about to go away, I'll go out and work or do something, it'll get sore again. Yeah, pickle juice is good, man. But anyway, so once you get to around the 155-50 range, you're going to start adding some of these adjunct grains to your mash. So um, now, even if you're relying on these to help convert, I still will use a little high temp. But if you've got an adequate amount of malted barley or malted wheat to convert all the corn, you can do it. You can go with a little less high temp when we're up at 185, right after the 120 minutes of gelatinization. When we add it and it hydrolyzes, it becomes thinner and more watery. That's the release of those starches. It's getting all those starches out of there and hydrolyzing. So, um, yeah, that's the best way to work it out there. Yeah, with a jar. Yeah, maybe that's why I've been to a lot when I was down there in Arkansas. Man, I got hammered Friday night. Man, I need to wait and do it Saturday night. That way, all day during the festival, I don't have a hangover like I did this year. I sat there at that table, oh, hung over all day. Maybe it's best to have that hangover for the ride home. Huh? But so when you get in the 155, 150 range, you can start adding some of these other grains to your mash bill, and it's part of the 2 to 2.5 pounds, per gallon. So you know we used a lot of that liquid initially to help gelatinize the corn, and so we don't need to add any more. So hypothetically, if we've got a 50-pound bag of corn, we're going to take 10 pounds out. So we're going to add 10 pounds of rye, maybe 5 pounds of rye, 5 pounds of wheat, right? So that'll be about 10 pounds out of 50. That's 20%. So that'd be about a right percentage for a malt to do your conversions, right? About a 20%, depending on your diastatic, but wheat or a 6-row at 20% should be plenty to do the whole conversion, whether you use the high temp alpha or not. So when you use that, fine, this is the temperature to add that. Mix it in and hold it. So if you have a little bit of that hot water left, you can use it to help maintain this temperature right at 150 for 60 minutes or so. 35, 40 may be adequate, but if you can do the full hour, especially in your coolers, that's going to hold those temperatures a lot longer. It'll help your conversion a whole lot. So you can get rid of the rest of your water and you're keeping that temp to 150 and add those malted grains, and you shouldn't denature at 145 to 50. So that's going to be fine for your beta glucanase, which is a natural enzyme that you find in the malts. You can also buy it, but that's what the beta glucanase is similar to a glucoamylase and how it debranches. Right, the alpha. We've been over. Let me pull up some pictures here and help kind of explain that for people that want to know. So this is what we normally see, and I saw in one of the groups, Bill Cluck and somebody, they were all talking, and somebody asked if the starches in rye was different than other vegetables. I mean, other grains, cereal grains. No, it is not. They were arguing that they're different. They are not. They're the same. This is amylose, and this is amylopectin. These are the starches that you find in rye, wheat, barley, corn, and any other starchy grain or starchy vegetable. They are the same. Now you will find them in different percentages, but the rye is going to be 300 to 1,000 molecules long complex sugars, just like it is in wheat, just like it is in corn, just like it is in barley, and most every other vegetable, the starchy vegetable. It will have a combination of these two. Very few have one and not the other. Most of them have a combination. But you'll see each of these little dots on all these little blue dots. That represents a glucose molecule, a single. Now, it's only showing part of it here, but these go for a long, long, long way, right? This is just a segment of it. Now, you'll see that the amylose is like, as I explained, it's like the strand of pearls, right? But it's 300 to 1,000 plus molecules long in your amylose. And in your amylopectin, you'll see the branching, just like pine tree branching or tree branching. You'll see the branching coming off. Now, what your alpha amylase does, it's an exoenzyme, so it debranches from the outside. So it's going from the outside and it's chopping all these, like in your amylopectin here, it's going to chop off a lot of these little branches, but they're going to be 6, 8, 10, 15 molecules long still, right? So it's just going to break them off in sections, but it's not going to totally convert them and make them something that a yeast can eat. So it's going to be what's called an oligosaccharide, which means molecules from 3 to 13 long. And your alpha is going to break it down into oligosaccharides. So it's still going to be anywhere from 3 to 13 molecules long or thereabouts. Some of them will get broken off randomly and 1 or 2, which yeast can eat. So you will get some converted to something that the yeast can handle. But yeah, all the starches are the same. They're not different. I don't know where these people get their info from, but it's probably Reddit or just bullshit. But so anyway, this exo enzyme alpha is breaking all these off from the outside, right? And debranching is what we call it. It's debranching, and you also debranch in the amylose. So it's just cutting it off in sections. Instead of taking branches off, it's just cutting it up in sections, right? So it's been cut. Once that gets cut into small sections, you've got what's called a limit dextrin. It's still a oligosaccharide. It's not fermentable, but it hydrolyzes, it thins it out. So once you get it to that stage, that's when your beta glucanase, which is an endoenzyme, so it works from the inside out. So it's going to go in the middle of these segments, and it's going to work from the inside out, debranching, also breaking them up into smaller units. So you'll get some monosaccharides, you'll get some disaccharides, and you probably will get a few trisaccharides with the beta. It's not as efficient as your glucose, so you may still have a few that are trisaccharides, so you don't get that full perfect conversion that you would with just a glucose, but we're gonna also use that glucose. So we're using alpha, a little high temp liquid alpha in the original, so it's going to help debranch these malted grains. They have alpha amylase in them as well, so it's going to help break debranch with the exoenzymes from the outside. It's going to also help from the inside. So if you wanted to, you can just use malted grains on corn and get a pretty good conversion. You're not going to get 100% conversion. You're not going to get as good a conversion as you can using the liquid high temp and the glucose. But without having those, if you don't have those, you can use malted grains and get pretty damn close, right? For all intents and purposes, close enough. It's yeah. But nothing's more efficient than doing both. And you use if you're going to use these malted grains, then you don't need to use as much liquid high temp when you start, and you won't need to use as much glucose at the end because you've got some assistance there, especially if you're using malted wheat. Now, you can also, instead of using 6-row, since we're not so concerned about our diastatic power anymore, because we're using those exogenous enzymes that are basically enzymes from not origins from within the grain. That's an endogenous enzyme. We're using exogenous. So endogenous enzymes are ones that you get from within the grain itself, endo, and exogenous are from without on the outside. So it's just a different prefix makes it tells you the origins, right? So doing both is definitely going to be the most efficient way, and that's the way I'm going to do it. That's the way I'm going to teach it because it's so much easier that way, and you don't have to learn your diastatic math and all that. But it's good to know. It's that's a little more advanced, but we're dealing with first time and intermediate and beginners. So it's definitely not going to hurt anything to use a little bit of high temp if you're going to use multigrades, and use a little glucose at the end, to help those disaccharides and those trisaccharides I was talking about, those few trisaccharides that you left behind. If you use that liquid glucose at the end, it's going to definitely debranch every one of those, and you're just going to end up with a bunch of monosaccharides and maybe a few dyes, but mostly mono. And yeast love that. That makes them the happiest that they can be. And happy yeast makes for a good, quick, very flavorful, no off flavor, stress yeast. I can't stress it enough. That's what gives you a lot of bad flavors. And so the less that you can stress your yeast, every little thing you do to make those yeast happier multiplies, because it's exponential. So if you keep the temperature proper, you keep the pH proper, you keep their nutrients, proper, um, you will definitely have a much happier fermentation, and the yeast will be happier, and you'll end up definitely with a better product. Now, there are certain distillers out there that are brilliant, they're masters, and they have found that there's certain ways that they can stress certain yeast at certain times, certain ways to get specific off flavors that may give it character or something like that. I don't even want to go there. That's next level stuff. That's advanced. We don't. Yeah, we're not there. So let's not even think about that, because when you try to do that, you're just going to get those off flavors. It's not going to be good. But and that's like using wild yeast. You can use some wild yeast and get some pretty decent results. But generally, I'd say if it's a true wild yeast and just not something that's been propagated so many times, like around a mash house, or around a malting house, or around somewhere where they're doing a lot of fermentation work, you can pretty much scrape the walls for the yeast that you need, right? But a true wild yeast is that comes with the fruit. Sometimes they're hit and miss. Sometimes they're good. Sometimes they're bad. They generally work off fast, and fast isn't always good, and it's definitely not complete. So you'll have to supplement it a lot of times with other yeasts, and it may be a good result or bad. Most people like to control their fermentation, so they like to control the yeast. So they will use specific. They'll try to kill everything off, all the wild yeast, all the bacteria, everything, by doing this high temperature stuff that we're talking about. So, but when you start adding malted grains and stuff at 150, it's not necessarily hot enough to kill everything. So you might introduce some lacto, because I think lacto requires like 160 plus to kill. So you can get a little bit of that. Good night, Tammy. Hope you have a good evening. So sometimes people introduce grains and they're like, how did I get that lacto? I did everything. I cooked it. Because I think it takes about 160 to kill all the lacto off. And when you start adding these grains at 135 to 55, you can sneak some in then. But back to once you get these broken up with the grains, that with the malts, if you're using malts, and they don't have to be malts. So if you're adding wheat, rye, just for the flavor, barley, like the crystal malts, or your dark chocolates and all those, don't use a whole lot of it. But they don't have any diastatic power anyway. So these are the temperatures you add them, let them rest, and then we're going to let it continue to cool. And then I know some of the liquid glucose will have you adding it at 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and some will have you adding it at 100 degrees. So use your label. Always use your label, and follow the instructions on your label, because each are produced a different way. And yeah, lacto can be your friend, or it can be your enemy. If lacto comes along in your fermentation late, it's awesome. It's not going to compete with sugars, and for sugars with the yeast, and you can finish it out dry with just the lacto. You got all the alcohol you need out of it. So you can let it soften up with that lacto to get that good creamy soft flavor and texture, which is great. But early on, it can compete with your yeast for the sugars, and it can lower your alcohol content in the mash to where it's that's what you want. Yeah. If what happens is, if you keep a certain level of sanitariness, um, is that even a word? If you keep certain things as sanitary as possible, you can add your lacto at the end. So you can keep it in a jar and skim it off each time, and then when your gravity gets to 1.010 or 1.015 or something like that, you can reintroduce it, and it's perfect. And that's probably a good way to do it. But if yours comes in late every time, and you pretty much comes in at the end, then that's optimal. That's perfect. But if it's present early on, you're generally going to have a lower alcohol ABV mash, which isn't the end of the world. But if it comes in early, and it comes in hard and strong early, then you can end up with a 1030 alcohol. You can end up with 3 or 4% alcohol in there, and it's definitely not good. But yeah, it's and for sourdoughs, yeah, makes good pizza bread too. So anyway, we've let our mash cool. Now we've added these grains. We've stirred them in well. So we're going to let it cool on down to about 100. And again, at 140, some of your liquid glucose you'll add there. Some of it's at 100, so you can add it there. So now we're going to let it cool to, about 90, 95, and now we can start doing a gravity check to see what kind of conversion. We can do starch tests to see, if there's any starches left, to see, check and see how well our conversion. But if you follow the rules, then you shouldn't really need to fool with the starch test, because you should get a good conversion if you kept the temperatures right, and the pH was 5.3 to start with, and you really kept those temperatures tight. You shouldn't have any issues unless um, especially using the high temp alpha and the liquid glucose, because that alone will take care of it. But with your malts, sometimes your malts get denatured um, in the Amazon warehouse, for example. If you get them from Amazon, sometimes, no, I'm not just knocking Amazon, other places too, but sometimes, you got a forklift holding that pallet, and it's malted barley, and where does it go? Up to the very top of the warehouse, and it's in Georgia, and it's in the middle of the summer. It's August, and then the top of that warehouse is 150 degrees, man. It's hot as fuck up there. So it can denature, and maybe not totally denature it, but it can have an impact on your grains when it gets that hot, right? So it's sometimes it's just old, and oxidized and age, and as it loses efficacy over time and some flavor. So yeah, if the fresher you can get it, the better. But once it gets down to 100, it's time to start activating your yeast, like I talked about, and since we got some grains, generally when you're dealing with grains, you're not going to need nutrients. If you're just doing corn, you can add maybe 10% or 20% of what nutrients that it calls for, just to help it along, because technically corn alone, unless it's malted, doesn't have quite as much yan and fan as needed, probably enough to do it. But if you just throw a little pinch in there to help it out, it would probably be beneficial, not a have to. But anytime you're dealing with other things, you don't have any malts, um, yeah, or if you're dealing with fruits, you're definitely going to need nutrients. If you're dealing with washes of any kind, you're going to need nutrients. Period. And that, Fermax or Fermo is a great nutrient. I know everybody tries to come up with lots of different nutrients, and there are. I will add, after I finish this spiel, there are some things that you can supplement these with that will give some additional things. But what we have to deal with, and what we have to have, is yan and fan. And I preach it and preach it. And yan is yeast assimilable nitrogen, and fan is free amino nitrogen. All right, you need those two things for yeast to be happy and for the fermentation to go well. So if you've got those, and you're keeping your yeast happy, then yeah, especially in your washes and your sugar washes and your tequilas and your rums, any of that stuff where you got high sugar with no, or even fruits. A lot of people say, oh, raisins. Raisins do not have the anaphan you eat. It gives good flavor, it gives good mouthfeel. It's good, but it's not good for a nutrient. And I know a lot of people use it for nutrients. Tomato paste, another popular nutrient that is not technically a nutrient, it's a supplement. So there's lots of good stuff in tomato paste, but it doesn't have the anaphan. But there are selenium, there's lots of calcium, there's biotins, there's lots of nutrients and minerals that are great. Zinc, the other things that you have to have, you got to have zinc and calcium, big plus. But so it's great for a supplement, but you really need to use the Fermax and Fermade. And if you use just those and those alone, you're going to get enough. But it certainly doesn't hurt to supplement. And I know Philbilly was working on a formula to do some supplemental, you know, um, nutrients. So zinc is a big plus. Some people use multivitamins. If you do, just make sure you use something that's not high in iron. You don't want iron. Less iron, the better. You don't want any iron at all. Iron is not good for your fermentations. It affects your calcium uptake, and it's just not good. And it will stress the yeast. So, adding some of those things will definitely help supplement and and make your yeast happy. So, we're mixed up our yeast. We've started our yeast, and we're going to let it sit in a warm, dark place with the towel over it in that bowl, and for 20-30 minutes, keep it on it. If it foams up more vigorously, it foams, the better. And then we're going to take our mash, and we're going to get that drill paddle, and that mud mixer, whatever you got, and we're going to super oxygenate our mash. We want to get as much oxygen, so maybe at the top, get it chopped up and get some oxygen in it. Just you want to see bubbles. You want to really oxygenate it as best you can, because that's the only time during the fermentation process that you want an aerobic environment. That means lots of air and oxygen. So when your yeast hits that, man, they get so drunk happy, they start, breeding like crazy and multiplying, and you get a good amount of yeast. Um, but after that, you really don't want a lot of oxygenation. So we're going to pitch our oyster shells in there, so we don't have to worry about our pH dropping too much and stressing the yeast. We got that in there to buffer. We're checking our pH again to make sure we're still close to 5.3. If not, we're going to add a little bit of, we're going to, yeah, well, with your fruit, it's very few fruits have the yin and fan that you need. But I will say, I generally add a little less than they call for, because adding too much nutrients can have an impact of flavor on your wines. Now, I do make a lot of wines, which is, um, I don't think the fruit skins they don't have enough yin and fan, both. If they did, all these wineries wouldn't have spent millions and millions of dollars developing Fermax and Fermade and Fermo, and they use it religiously in their wines. And whether it's skin on or off, I know, like white wines, they definitely pull the skins, but like on red wines, they leave the skins in, because that's what gives the wine that red, that dark red flavor. It has to come from the skin of the grape, because the middle of the grape is not red. So that's where they get a lot of that full red color. And when you just don't have enough. There may be some. I'm not saying there's none, but they went to great lengths to make it to where they could use this Fermax and Fermo and Fermade, and to give the proper nutrients. And most fruits, they just don't have it, or enough of it. Some will have some, but most all fruits don't have enough. But your grains, especially if you have malted grains, they have plenty. Bran flakes, they've got it, which that makes a decent nutrient if you don't have anything else. Yeast alone, just in yeast alone, they've got it. The yeast itself does, so you can boil those up and use those as nutrients too. But got to look at expense. Yeast isn't cheap. Um, so I think we figured it out one time, and I think I'm spending like 25, 28, 30, almost 30 cents per 5 gallon, uh, must, when I do my wines and stuff. So it's relatively cheap. It's a lot cheaper than trying to do a lot of other things. But yeah, with most all your fruits, you really need to add nutrients. Now, they went to a lot of experimentation, and I've heard of step feeding, and they basically feed it a little bit at a time, over time, instead of giving it to it all at once, which, um, yeah, so yeah, you need to, I'm sure there's a chart out there. I haven't looked for one, but we're going to right now. I don't know if AI knows what yin and fan is. Yin. Fucking. Okay, I'm going to have to spell it out. East. AI can be stupid as hell sometimes. The other day I was looking at whiskey caps to get a picture of a whiskey cap to show somebody what the horse that I was talking about. And it pulls up freaking ball caps. And I went to a whiskey head, whiskey cap. I had to give it like 15 different things. Finally, I just ended up going to Copper Steel Co. and pulling a picture off their page because it's like, man, it's sometimes you just. Okay, now some fruits will have one or the other, but generally they don't have enough of both. Um, and it depends on variety, climate, and there's a lot of other things. And that's just in the grapes. Now, apples don't have hardly any, and most of your fruits won't have hardly any. But some of the grapes will have the yeast assimilable nitrogen, but not as much as the free amino nitrogen. And it varies back and forth. But that goes back to other fruits like berries, have yeast on their skin. Yeah, so some of the fruits that have like yeast on them, they'll probably have, and that might be where you're talking about from the skin. It may have wild yeast on the skins, and that may, because the yeast will have yan and fan, and the wild yeast will have yan and fan. So maybe that's what you're getting from the skins itself, because most of your fruits will have wild yeast on them, which is something this mentioned that I really didn't think about. So that's a good possibility for sure. But it's interesting, with different fruits. They do the gas chromatography and everything to find out exactly how much of this they have per milligram, and they add it, dose it by that. So that's really fine tuning. We don't get anywhere near that. So, um, but I do generally add a little bit less than what the label calls for. So I don't want to overdo it, especially on wines. Now, if you're making a brandy, it's less critical. But for your wines where you're drinking the mash, basically the must, yeah, you want to keep it pretty as clean as you can. So sometimes not using a bunch, you know. Well, I missed something, Tyler. Um, yeah, I think it starts up too vigorous and come off flavors. I think that's the wild yeast that's actually on the fruit, which is why, when I do my fruits, they definitely get cooked at above 160, because I want to kill every bit of that off there, because I don't want that happening. And that's exactly what that is, John. It's wild yeast that are on the skins that are giving the off flavors and vigorous, and that's two of the big telltale signs of wild yeast. They burn out like a star, man. They bright and they burn out really fast. So yeah, and that's exactly why. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good point. Yeah, different yeast will require different nutrients. Absolutely. For sure. Tyler, I'm not sure. Brother, I'm paying 236 is what it was in London, Kentucky. And I think it's about 250 something here per gallon, but I'm not sure. You talking about propane for our tanks? Maybe he's that far behind. I don't know. $5 again. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so I think, John, I think that's probably the case. And but I would rather, get rid of that wild yeast, and most all the wine and everything. I definitely, when I add my water, it's at 160, or I use um, potassium metabisulfate, which is a Camden tablets, and I use that to kind of kill everything off. So that works well too, and the potassium metabisulfate will basically kill a lot of bacterias. It'll kill all the wild yeast. If you've got some, you know, bird shit or something on your fruit that you didn't get rinsed off well, E. coli, any bacteria like that, it'll pretty much take care of all that. And then I usually let it sit with that for a day, and then I'll try to gas that off. But yeah, that's another difference that, I never use that other than, with my wines, or brandies. But, you never hear people with grains, using that Camden tablets, and you usually don't see it in other recipes other than wine and brandy recipes. So, but I think that's why the skins are given good nutrients, is because of the wild yeast, which is a plus, but being a wild yeast and working off fast is a negative. So, I guess there's a pro and con there. And yeah, right. With different yeast, you're going to need different amounts of nutrients. And I found it very interesting in an article I was reading lately about in winemaking is how they've broken it down and adding nutrients little by little, and not all at once. So, wow, 5.55 per gallon, man. Jeez, you must be in the high tax area. I think on the way to Arkansas, pretty much the whole way, it was in the 237 to 260 range. And here in Kentucky and Southern Kentucky, I think around London, it's along the interstates, especially 236, and I'm paying like 249 to 259 here in Lexington. Not bad. Better than the $3 or $4, but I want to get back to $108.85 like it was a while back. So anyway, we've pretty much gone beginning to end, and now at this point we've checked the pH of our mash. We've got our yeast starter going. It's foaming up, and it's been sitting for 30 minutes. We've checked the ambient temperature of the room and the temperature of the mash. And if we need to make, checked our gravity. So we're going to pull out our little chart and do the temperature conversion to make sure that we're, what kind of conversion we got truly on our mash. So you got our hydrometer in there. So we're writing down our starting mash. We're writing down the temperature of the mash. We're writing down, making notes. And when I say make notes, this is on a beer and on a wine. So if you're mashing in grains for a whiskey, you write beer at the top. If you're mashing in fruits for a brandy, we'll write wine on the top, because beer and wine is legal to make. And if they find that at the top of your chart on your notes, it can't be used as evidence because it's for beer and wine, which is legal. So always label it that way. Don't label it brandy. Don't label it whiskey recipes. This is a beer and a wine recipe, right? It just happens that we might distill it if it doesn't turn out well. Archery tournament. Oh, well, I'm okay shooting at archery, but my specialty is pistols and rifles. I've been told I'm fairly good. Some buddies of mine in the military said that I'd have been scooped right off the line and taken to the A team, and I outshoot them all. I smoke them, especially in pistol. I'm pretty good at pistol. Probably my specialty best. I love shooting. I got a bunch of guns I ain't never shot yet. I need to get out and find me a range. I wish you think, I guess after hunt season I'll just go out and some of the national parks, well, national forest, I should say, not parks, but national forest, and set up some targets and do a little target shooting out there. I guess if you can hunt there, you can shoot there, right? I would think. But Yeah, I'm pretty good with a pistol. I can hit clay pigeons with a 357 Magnum. I had some buddies of mine when we were in college, and Carlos got him a big. He's no longer with us. He's a great guy. He got him one of them clay pigeon throwers, them automatic ones, and you stack it up. It was mechanical. It wasn't. I don't know. Anyway, he had that thing set up, and it wasn't like the little red ones that you throw. I had to get one of those. I couldn't afford one of them fancy ones, but they were out there shooting at Clack Mountain. Was in school at Moorhead, and me and my buddy Doug passed away this past year. God rest his soul. Great guy. We went out there. He's my college roommate. We went out there and I guess Carlos and Darren Roark, and there's a bunch of us out there. Several of them. I can't remember who all was there. Larry Grigsby and a few others out there shooting. They were shooting at these damn clay pigeons with the 12 gauge, and they couldn't hit. They couldn't hit. And I was about half drunk, and I was like, shit, y'all, I can hit more with this damn pistol than y'all can with the shotgun. They're like, yeah, right. We'll see it. I'd never shot at a clay pigeon in my life with a pistol, but I'd done a lot of target shooting. It's 357, and I shoot wad cutters out of it, so it was probably the cheapest bullet you could put in that thing. And it's for paper targets. For those that don't know, it's wad cutter. It had a square nose, and it was good for shooting at targets. That's about all it's good for. It wasn't a good ballistic round for hunting or for knockdown or for maiming or killing. It was just pretty much cheap target ammo. So anyway, I was all right. I was about half lit, and I said, "Pull." I took it 350. I already had the hammer cocked on it. That was a revolver and Smith and Wesson, and I think it had wasn't a 4-inch barrel. It probably 6. Yeah, 6-inch barrel. And so first one, boom, blasted it. They're like, "No way, you'll never hit another one." I'm like, "Pull." Boom. This is one handed. And blasted it. And they're like, "There's no way, man." Then they said, "You're shooting snake charmers out of that, aren't you?" And for those that don't know, snake charmers are like little buckshot, that come out of a pistol round. They're usually plastic encased, and they're used for snakes and small game and little things like a buckshot, close range. Well, no. And I had to pull the bullets out, prove they're not snake charmers, they're just wad cutters. And they're like, "All right, let's see that again." So boom, did it the third time. They're like, "No way." And I think I missed the fourth or fifth one. And then the sixth one, I let it go a long way before I hit it. And I hit 5 out of 6. I missed one of them. I don't know if it was the fourth or fifth one, but the sixth one, I let it go a long way. And I did double hand it. And it was probably a good 40, 50 yards away, which is a tough shot. And I aimed high, and I knew I wasn't going to hit that son bitch, but pow. And sure enough, dust. And they're like, "No way." I surprised myself. I had no idea. And I was like, "Hell yeah." I had no idea. I was just like, "You damn straight." And they're like, "Man, you're one of the most dangerous people I know." And he's like, "That's kind of like Hollywood shooting." I'm like, "Man, they can't shoot like that in Hollywood. They put little, detonators on shit to make it look like you hit it. In Hollywood, that's all radio controlled kind of shit. I surprised myself. I couldn't believe I hit those. So next, me and Doug, we went to Rose's. I guess at the time it was a store that kind of a mixed store, and they had a lot of everything. They had guns and ammo and targets. We got one of them little red slingers where you can sling those clay pigeons manually, and throw them. So now I was like, damn, I want to see if I can do this some more. Hell, this is awesome. And so we went a time, and I didn't know it. We were throwing the damn things backwards, and they were going out like knuckleballs. And I'm like, holy shit! It wasn't like a frisbee, like those. And they were kind of moving around. I'm like, shit, it's hard to fall. And I still hit 4 out of 6. And one of them went way up, and it was just dropping straight down. And I fall that thing down, and I went, pow, and hit it about 6 feet off the ground. And Doug's like, I don't know if you hit that or not. And I'm like, well, if it's on the ground broken in one spot, I missed it. But if it's spread out over a pretty good little area, I hit it. So we walked over to where it hit. Sure enough, it spread out and I'd hit that son of a bitch. What's going on, Jay? But yeah, but anyway, I shot IDPA and did real well. And here in Kentucky, they got some of the best shooters in the world. So the IDPA, International Defense Pistol Association, attracted some of the best shooters from all over, and I smoked them. But I had a buddy of mine. I got this FAL rifle. Uh, it's not a Belgium FN, but it was another country made it. It wasn't a French. It was not a. Trying to think of where it was made. Anyway, it's a FAL, a 308, kind of a STG 58. It might have been Austria. I think it was from Austria, and there's an STG 58. Has the little handle you carry it, and I didn't have a scope on it or anything, just a ghost ring and sights. And me and my buddy Eric went out. He was in the military, and we took paper plates to shoot at and some cardboard. So we went 300 yards out, 300 meters out, and put one of these paper plates up and drove all the way back. It's like, well, fuck, I can't see that. So we drove all the way back out again and taped it to the middle of a piece of cardboard. It was, I think it came off an oven or a clothes dryer or something that I had, and I was just going to use that to hold the targets on. Well, they had something for targets. It was at a range, but we decided to put them on the box so we could put it at the dead center of the box so we could see that box. We couldn't see the paper plate, so my buddy took his first three shots, and we drove out there, and you couldn't see it on the plate or the box. And it's like, damn, I don't know where this thing's hitting. He's like, man, that's thing's hitting. It's off. So oh shit. So let's drive back. And then I took my three shots. And I didn't know if where it was going to be, and had no idea on the box. We got up there on the paper plate, and you could about like that. You could cover all three of the holes up with my fingers just like that. And so that's about a 4-inch MOA, maybe, if you add all those up for three shot. And he's like, man, if you shot like that in the military, they would have scooped you up and sent you 18 right off the fucking range, man. You'd have been in sniper school tomorrow. So I as a kid, I grew up kind of in Eastern Kentucky, and you know, my dad was a gun collector, and I snuck pistols out because that's the easiest thing to get out of the house, right? So I'm 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, and going out in the woods shooting. I'm shooting at my GI Joe and his helicopters and shit, and his little, you know, in his little Jeep and stuff. I'm setting them up there in the woods, pinking them, and yeah, and so I got to get pretty good, at shooting a pistol from doing that. But I was mostly a target shooter, right? And that international defense pistol really opened my eyes at um, at how important it is to learn to shoot tactically on the move from cover. You know, target shooting is not where it's at. You can get good target shooting and it's fine for competition. But when it comes down to saving your ass, and fighting and protecting yourself and your loved ones, you really need to learn how to shoot moving. And it was totally new to me, and it's something it took a little bit of adjustment for me um, to learn how to adjust. And I'd always been, boom or boom and boom, on a rest or something like that. I'd never really done it on the run or from cover, and it adds a whole new element to shooting that everybody really, everyone should learn to do that. And IDPA is a good way to learn it. They do IPSC. IPSC's more of a gun race. It's you go in there with your $300-500 gun and you're shooting against people with comped out $3,000, pistols and $10,000 rifles. It's hard to compete with that kind of stuff, but you do the best you can. But learning to shoot, in that mode where you're moving from cover to cover, shooting on the move, things like that. For it opened my eyes, and that's definitely what you need to do and learn how to protect yourself and your loved ones. And all right, well, with that, it's probably a good time to tune out. Missed Clint tonight. I'm gonna have to give him a call after this is over and find out what the hell going on with my brother. Glass Cop was in here to help out, and good seeing everybody. And it's good little how to. It's great for beginners. You can always come back to this video. I think I worded it a little bit different from mash to distilling, beginning to end for beginners. So learn it. Just if you need to come back in to figure out um, what temperatures and pull up the charts and do all these things. Yeah, tactical is where it's at. It is time. It's for me the same thing. Hell, I've got probably 10 guns I ain't never shot, Richard. That's just damn shame. I got ARs and 308s that I ain't even scoped in yet, man. Yeah, yeah. And with that foul, fouls ain't probably the most accurate. They're mostly designed for repetitive, downrange shooting is boom, 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 and a lot of them were full auto. This has the legs that fold down. I wasn't using those, it's just I was free holding it, standing up. Yes, I will do a shot play. Wait, let's see. I'm gonna do another little snort of that Big Easy Peach I pulled down. I was on still talking with Matt and Big Easy. So I figured, well, I'll pull a little bit of Big Easy Peach down to sit and drink while I'm with them on their podcast. And it was a good podcast for those that don't know those guys. Check them out. Great guys. Uh, but we had a pretty good little podcast, and I drank a little Big Easy Peach. And if you haven't had it, Big Easy makes some pretty good peach brandy. I can tell you that. Yeah, I love that STG, that STG 58. Awesome gun, man. It's a Warhammer. It's a great shooting gun. I found out they're pretty damn accurate. It's maybe I just got the special one. Um, it was an old used gun. It was a military gun for sure. The receiver I put on it. Now I got this and I put it together back in the old days when it was legal to put. You had to have so many American parts and all that. But I got a Fabrique Militar receiver out of Brazil, and it was from a Fabrique Nacional, an FN. Um, I'm trying to think it from their factory in Brazil. So it's from FN and done with their specs and standards, and it's one of the gunsmithing shops in Brazil that actually makes those. It's called Fabrique Militar. So I got the receiver from them, and it's a damn good gun. Yeah, yeah. I just added that receiver to a standard STG. Yeah, and back in the day, I mean, I guess you can still do that, but now I think they make you put so many American parts at the back in that day is back in the 80s. They didn't require it, but I think in the 90s, mid 90s or something, when they started getting funny, even with flash suppressors, they start taking those off ARs like and bayonet lugs off ARs. Like, what the fuck? That doesn't make it any less lethal. Stupid shit. And I don't get political, but goddamn, that's eat up with tough. And I think even Reagan was anti-gun. So it's not a Democrat Republican thing. It's just common sense versus not. And maybe anybody that wants to disarm us wants to harm us. That's all I can say. So that don't matter whether you got a D or an R in front of your name. If you want, I mean, both parties have tried. If they want to disarm us, they want to harm us. So yeah, I think now you have to have so many American-made parts on there, and it's not that bad. It's you know, but yeah, it's a little bit different now. But I've got several guns that I pieced together back then. I've got um, the fowls, and actually I've got another one that I need to put together. And trying to think of some of the different parts guns I did. Oh, I've got an MP5 I put together as parts. Um, a Dragunov 7.62 54R, old Russian sniper rifle. Except I think this might have been a Yugoslavian, but it's an Eastern Bloc Dragunov. A few others to put together. Yeah, I've been. Yeah. Some parties, some states, it's just crazy. I mean, I don't know. My whole thought process behind guns is you're not going to make laws that outlaws are going to follow. So a criminal that is going to murder somebody could give two shits less if they're going to violate a gun law before they murder you. I mean, they don't think about, oh, wait, I can't kill them. Damn it. I'm going to break this gun law if I kill them. No murderer says that ever. So it's just stupid to think anybody other than a law abiding citizen is going to abide by those laws. So what's the purpose other than take that gun out of out of a law abiding citizen's hands? That's it. So, I don't know. That's just crazy. The logic, I don't follow it. I don't think they have, a lot of it. I don't want to sound sexist, but I know a lot of female politicians, now there are a few, Tulsi Gabbard and a few like that understand, but I don't want to be sexist, but there's a lot of female politicians that, oh, if we just didn't have those guns, nobody would ever get shot by one. Well, yeah, the criminals still have them, and they're still going to get them. We've got hundreds of millions of them out there. Yeah. I talk to Jay all the time. He's a gunsmith. He knows how he builds a lot of guns for a lot of police departments and stuff. Yeah, me and Jay talk all the time. He is very sharp. He wants to see my collection. I got a lot of old stuff that um, you can't hardly find anymore. They don't allow you to import stuff I've got anymore. But nothing illegal. No, I have no machine guns or nothing like that. But I am looking forward to the end of the year and beginning of next year. You no longer have to pay the $200 for a suppressor, so I'm going to definitely get me a suppressor or two this next year, and I won't have to pay the $200 tax stamp because shit, by the time you get two or three of those, man, it's $600, and it's like, damn, that's as much as some of the suppressors I'm looking at, $600 to $700. So yeah, Jay knows his shit. Yeah, he's very, very knowledgeable, very, very knowledgeable. He puts together a lot of old guns and stuff and he does a lot for the police departments and stuff too. But old collectors and stuff, converting them, making them more original. Yeah, I think the price is going to drop on suppressors, but I think it's going to be a wait period because they're not going to have enough people to make them. They're not going to be able to keep up with the demand. So, actually, at one point, I was thinking about uh, applying for a license and doing that as a hobby and making suppressors, right? Uh, I know they're using some of these 3D printers that can, instead of plastic, they use some types of metal that they can 3D print. So yeah, yeah. Now, well, the thing about disarming is the people in England thought the same thing back, in the 90s. Well, if everybody gives their guns up and everybody gives them, and there's no more guns anywhere, nobody has guns, then it'll be safer. And then the next thing you know, Muslims are coming in and taking over your country, and you're left, holding a billy club and a knife. You don't want to be in that position. So the people that want to disarm you want to harm you, and It's not a, it's, even if you get all the guns, then you just make yourself vulnerable, you know. And I don't want to be holding a knife or a billy club and my age trying to fight, a group of bad guys off. So I think I'll keep my guns and my. Yeah, there's a lot of that you can make, as long as you get the apply for them and put a label on them. I mean, you can make your own legally. You just have to. Well, now you have to pay the 200, and you have to follow certain guidelines. You have to put a serial number on it, make it identifiable, send them pictures of it, and you can't change it or make any alterations to it. But there's the whole litany of things you got to do, and I'm looking at possibly making some. Because there's going to be a huge demand and the supplies. It's I mean, as bad as it is, it's a waiting period even now, paying 200. So at the beginning of the year, and everybody and their mother's gonna want one. It's gonna be really tough. So I don't know. It might be better just to pay the $200 now and get it than to wait till January and it take 10 months to get one. I don't know. It might be best just to pay the 200 and grin and bear it. But speaking of Barrett, have y'all seen those? What is it? MADRs? Let me Google it. I think it's MADR Barrett's. Fucking, I'll tell you what. Barrett, AI sucks ass. Fucking. What is it? Somebody might out there know. It's the new modular rifle that they have that's badass, and I think they're like $20,000 the government pays for them. They're really high dollar. Uh, it's not the ASR. It's a modular. Hmm. Anybody know what I'm talking about? MADR or something like that. Yeah, I got a buddy of mine that he throws knives. I used to throw a little bit, but not like a not like I should. I'd probably against most people I'd get my shit get handed to me. All right, y'all. Well, yeah, you look at how many guns. Here's a good statistics to look at. Look at the number of active military in every country, and it'll show you the numbers and how many active duty military troops there are in every country. Now compare that to how many hunting licenses are sold annually in the United States. That right there tells you why no country wants to fuck with the United States, because we have like 100 times more hunters than most countries have, standing armies, and they won't come here. Never let go of your weapon. Move if you have to. If yeah, Yeah, if you get into a state or something where they're, well, I think we got a Supreme Court that's not going to let that happen. They're going to be around for quite some time, unless unless it gets packed. So I don't think we have anything to worry about. But there's a reason we got that Second Amendment. All right, y'all. Good session, and it's a good one for beginners. And I guess it's labeled properly. Hopefully, anybody that looks at some of the old, I've made the mistake of not naming them uniquely, each of them. So I probably should have been doing that all along. Um, yeah, we do definitely. Yeah, there's like two or three guns per person. Yeah, it's crazy, and it's what it should be. Uh, but yeah, it should be pretty easy to identify. Anybody that wants to come back and look for this particular November 8th podcast for how to from beginning to end. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Hit that like button and subscribe, follow. And if you got buddies in the hobby or that might be interested in the hobby, send them our way. We'll get them educated and get them on the right start, and eliminate some mistakes, and make it where it's a good fun hobby, a rewarding hobby. Thanks, Matthew, and thanks everybody. And we will see you come Wednesday, and hopefully our buddy Clint will be back. I don't know where I'm worried about him, so I'm gonna have to message him after this is over and check on him and see what's going on. He probably might be working late or not feeling well. Either way, we're gonna find out. But anyway, we'll see you all Wednesday, 8 Eastern, same time, same back channel. Peace out. Love y'all. Shine on.